I'm Ryan Siebel.
Hi, I'm Sumi Han.
And we're here with the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center. We are part of the University of Illinois up at Urbana-Champaign. Appreciate you guys having us down today. I'm glad to have exposure in a part of the state that I think has been perhaps neglected more than we'd like to see. So I'll turn it over to Sumi.
All right. So thank you everyone to come to our workshop for 2018 IECC Updates. And we also would like to thank C.E.O.S.I. Did I say it right? Code Enforcement Officers in Southern Illinois, most of you. So thank you for inviting us and giving us a chance to present at your meeting. So before we dive in, so we have brought some handout. If you don't have the handout, it's here.
I'm missing it.
And also, so today's presentation, we think it's about like a 3-hour total, but we will break in the middle. So the first session, we are trying to cover the commercial provisions of IECC, and then we will have a break, and then second half we'll try to cover the residential. But in between, please feel free to just interrupt us if you have a question or if you have a good story to tell, so we can all hear from you guys. So it's not just us providing information, but we would like to have this opportunity to just get to know you a little bit better and also hear from you too. So I know there are some crazy situation or interesting situation that you run into, so don't hesitate to just stop me and say, hey, I have this case and I want to just share that this is crazy or this is brilliant. So, okay? So it'll be very informal, so don't just afraid to stop me or stop Ryan. And also, before I start, so the handout, I found some of the mistake last night on the handout, so I corrected the presentation, but there'll be some, typos and mistake here, so I will point out if I can remember it, so, and also we will update the updated version on our website, so later on, if you want to look at it, you can download a new document from our website. So who we are. So Ryan briefly mentioned that we are from SEDAC, Smart Energy Design Assistance Center, and we are at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. So we are the applied research program at the university, but also we work with a private partner, 360 Energy Group, and they're up in Chicago. So what we mostly do is we work with mostly public sector public sector clients, and we provide advices or analysis for energy efficiency savings. So our goal is to improve the energy efficiency in the state of Illinois and also reduce energy footprint of Illinois. So before, I had a chance to meet some of you, and then I asked, have you ever heard of SEDAC? And the answer was no. So today, hopefully, is a good introductory, session, and you guys could let us, get to know of us a little bit better. So that's my hope. So most of our businesses, so far, so we've been working here in Illinois for about 15 years. And most of our work was about the public sector energy efficiency. But this is kind of a new role to us. So now SEDAC, starting from January 1st, is the Illinois Energy Conservation Code training provider, meaning that the responsibility of state training in the state of Illinois for the energy code used to be at a DCEO. Now it's that responsibility transferred to the Illinois EPA, and Illinois EPA hired SEDAC to provide this energy code training. So this training program is sponsored, by Illinois EPA. So our energy code training program actually includes many things. So first of all, that we provide technical support So we have a 1-800 phone number. So if you have any questions, you can always call us. And actually, better way to get us is actually through the email. And we have an email address set up for Energy Code, which is energycode@sedac.org. So you can always send us questions through this email. And so far, we've been getting lots of questions from the code officials, and also from architects and engineers, and also homeowners. So if there are questions, sometimes it's an easy question, and sometimes it's like a puzzling question. There are multiple emails going back and forth. Sometimes, code officials send us a drawing, and this is what I found, and this, it gets complicated, as you can imagine. So we are not to make a final judgment, but we are there to help you and then provide our opinion if you need any, opinion from other than, your department or something. So not only the question, as I said, if you have any good example that you feel like it's worth sharing, contact us so we can put that information out. We can share that information with other communities and other code officials or architects or engineers too. So that's one of the services that we provide under this Energy Code training program, the technical support. And second one is online resources. So we do have a website, designated for the Energy Code and the Energy Code training program. So if you come to our website, sedac.org/energy-code, it has lots of information there. We do have some information about the, Illinois Energy Conservation Code, when it's going to be adopted, what's the process of, the adopting it, and also we do provide some like FAQs. There are some questions that already came in, and then the answers that we provided, so you can kind of look through what kind of questions and the answers are there. And also we do provide the workshops, like today's event, in-person workshops, and this is our second in this year. And then first one that we did on the up north at the South Suburban Building Code Officials meeting. So we're very happy to be here to meet many of you from the Southern Illinois area. So that's one of the services that we provide. And then we have another training program that we are providing, that's webinar. So for this year, we have provided 2 webinars. One was about the 2018 IECC updates, and it was an hour-long webinar, so it was much shorter. But if you're interested in those information, those recordings and the PowerPoint, those are all updated and uploaded on our website. And the second second webinar that we provided was about the air sealing, and that turned out pretty well, and we had lots of good questions and lots of interaction, even though it was webinar, so I think it's really good. And then lastly, we also developed the online on-demand code training modules. So this is different from webinars. So webinar is the one that real time it's happening, even though we record and we made it available. The fourth one is like at your time. This is an online module, you register, and then you go through the module at your convenience. If you don't have time to go through the whole module at one sitting, you can just stop and then come back, and you can continue. And then we provide continuing education for all of our education, so workshops and webinars and even online modules.
Are you considered preferred provider through ICC?
We are not yet, but we're looking into it.
Okay.
So would that make a difference?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Unless we can get it through here.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, well, for this particular one, it's been approved through our organization.
Right.
As preferred
Okay.
provider.
Yeah.
Good.
So anything we have, we can always get that.
Okay.
Category. If you had others, not
through the web,
not for our organization, it would
Right.
benefit people.
Right.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
we are definitely looking into it, but not currently ICC. efficiency provider, but our certificate is for BPI and AEE so far currently. But we're looking into expanding that. So this is the internet, the screenshot of our website. So if you go to our website, it's kind of blurry there, but on your right, there's Energy Code Training tab. If you click it, you will have the menu on the left that has, workshop, webinar, and FAQ and contact us kind of thing. And this is a screenshot of our online module. So far we have developed 4 modules, and that is, first one is residential, second one is the commercial envelope, and then third one is commercial lighting, and fourth one is commercial HVAC. So currently these are based on 2015 IECC because that's the current code, but we are looking into updating this to 2018 IECC. And we will announce when that happens, and so if you signed up for our newsletter, that announcement will go out. And if you want to, kind of check it out, like what kind of changes and what are those, you can always go through this online modules. So this online module is like a self-learning, so it's a little different. So to make sure that you actually understood or went through our module, we're providing like a quiz question. It's not terribly difficult, but and it's a basically open book, so you can open your code book or you can open the separate window to our module and you can go through the quiz. But we have created like 10 questions per module, and then if you pass more than 70, have more than 70%, that's a passing grade and you could get a certificate. But don't worry, if you didn't succeed at the first, trial, you can always retake. There's no limitation on retaking it, so you can come back and retake and complete the module. And we imagine each module will take maybe an hour, maybe maximum an hour and a half. So all 4 modules, maybe 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, 6 hours maximum. But that's it's depending on how fast or how slow you are. And this is example of one of our online module. This is a residential module. So if you sign up and then click the residential module, then you will see, there are like chapters on your left, so you can navigate through this menu. And we have contents in here, and there's like a next button here that you push to go to the next slide, or you can always go through here too. But to get the certificate, I believe you need to hit the next button, so that way the computer knows that you actually read it and then went to the next section. Any questions so far on online modules?
They are available to anyone, so if you even have homeowners saying, why in the world are you making me do this? Feel free to send them. They can go through just the residential module. So we tried to make this more of an introductory code modules rather than getting into the real nitty-gritty of the code. So this could be a good resource for homeowners or even business owners.
Right. Ryan mentioned a good point. So this module is, our intended audience is like a beginner level or maybe intermediate. So this doesn't cover all the details that probably you guys are aware of, but this is a good starting point for anybody who is not that much familiar with the energy code. And this is just a simple question, that these are all multiple choice. So, there are all sometimes one, correct answer, sometimes multiple, So it's not terribly difficult. So I see some chuckles because I, showed the questions. Hopefully this doesn't turn off, your desire to visit this online modules. So that's kind of, intro to our program and what we do. And now we would like to talk about the Illinois Energy Conservation Code. So, Illinois Energy Conservation Code. So currently, it's 2050 based on 2015 IECC with Illinois amendments. But at the same time, the next code cycle has begun. The adoption process has begun. So for the 2018 IECC. So the advisory councils are having meetings, and subcommittees are having meetings to discuss the proposals that was submitted by March 31st.
Do you guys know if when they adopt this, is the last time we changed the International Code Council, when you did you run through the res check program, they made that to where it could isolate. Previously, you could isolate out Illinois because of the drop-off. Do you know or if they're going to be doing that? Because currently, if you check into 2015 with the 5 air exchanges, Illinois shows it's not going to pass.
Right.
I don't believe that they are going to provide specialized
Code variations
Code
through
variations.
the res check module.
correct. So it will use the original code book language. That's something we will talk about is Illinois is working on trying to reduce how many amendments and variations such that hopefully in the future you can provide that that verification through ResCheck and ComCheck in an easier fashion.
So the effective date of the 2018 IECC being effective here in Illinois, there's no set date yet, but it is estimated sometime in March of 2019. And the official announcement will be given from the CDB. And as soon as we hear the official announcement, we'll post to our website and also we'll send out the emails. But it is expected to be March of 2019 instead of January of 2019. So also because the review process for the amendment proposal are already begun, so the proposals that have been submitted is actually available on the CDB website. So if you are interested in seeing what kind of proposals were made, it's there. And also later on, we are going to talk about some of those proposals and see, what kind of proposals were made and why and how, and does this look, like a good idea or not. So we will briefly talk about those too. And also the meetings from the subcommittees and general the advisory council for this code amendment process is also posted on the CDB website. So if you are interested in that, you can also check out their website. Also, you can come to our website to go to CDB if that's easy for you.
Who with the CDB is dealing with who's the main person over there?
Lisa Mattingly.
Who?
Lisa
Lisa what?
Mattingly.
Attorney General.
No.
No.
Mattingly, not Mattingly.
Mattingly, okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm in
Lisa
the Chicago.
Mattingly.
So I can get you Lisa's information later, but
Okay.
she's in charge of hosting the meeting and then putting together the proposal and stuff. Do you have any specific questions
No,
for
I'm just
CDB?
curious. I deal with some other people in the CDB, but on a different code levels, different codes. So
I see. Energy code is Lisa.
Okay. Thank you.
So in Illinois, by law, all commercial and residential buildings must follow the Illinois Energy Conservation Code. And I know some communities kind of opt out by themselves. By law, they're supposed to follow it. I'll just put it that way. So why we are even talking about energy code, why it's important. So there are some blank here, and this is a quiz for you. So commercial and residential buildings in the U.S. consumes how much, what percentage of nation's total primary energy? What do you think?
60%.
60%. Okay. Do we have any other number than 60?
65.
65.
Make
Oh.
it a bit more.
Okay, actually it's 40%. So rest of the percent, like rest of 60% is for like industry and transportation. So, but 40 is still, big. And then second quiz question. So building consumes how much of electricity in the U.S.? We're just talking about the electricity. The residential and commercial building consume
65.
Oh, very close. It's actually like a 70 to 72% of the electricity is actually consumed by the buildings. That's how much, that's actually enormous. And the last question.
Does that factor in street lighting also?
I believe so, but then I don't know technically if they count that as a building
Yeah, that's probably
energy
part of the other.
or the transportation or
Lot lighting, yeah.
That comes from the building, so.
Right.
Right. So there's like a subtle, categories, it's hard, but in general, if we're saying just buildings, then that's how much.
Yeah, it's all coming off the same service.
Right. For the, CO2 emission, so what percentage of the U.S. total CO2 emission is attributed to building, commercial and residential buildings?
30%.
Close, 40%. So, you can easily think that buildings consume 40% of energy and actually, emit like 40%, and then electricity is something like that. So that's like a lot. So that's why energy code is important. So this is kind of blurry, it's hard to see, but the idea is to show you the actual like a subdivision of the electric consumption. So this pie chart is the commercial buildings spend like a 35% of electricity and residential 37%. In that commercial building, most of it like HVAC, lighting, appliances, and electronics and other uses. And for the residential, appliances and electronics is actually the largest pie chart, section, and then HVAC, and then lighting and some water. So this actually personally tells me that actually, energy code doesn't necessarily deal with the appliances and then personal electronics, but the things are changing, and actually the future energy code might want to tap into that area too, if we want to conserve energy and enforce with the energy code. So benefits of energy code, that's actually like a similar to what we just talked about. So if the buildings comply with the energy code, they estimated that energy consumption will be reduced approximately by like 3.5 quadrillion BTU. That's like a 10 to the 15 power of the 15. That's a lot, and that's equivalent to like 260 power plants. And then if buildings comply to the energy code currently, they estimated that probably they will reduce by 3% of the CO2 emission. And then in terms of dollar saving, that could contribute to the $30 billion by 2030. So that's a lot of big numbers, and that's why energy code is important, and that's why we are here to talk about energy code with you guys. And to just show you the history of the energy code improvement. So this graph shows you on top, the red part is residential, the bottom part is commercial, blue, and then x-axis is like a year. It starts from 1975 all the way to 2018. This is based on the 2018 energy code. And then this is a 0, this is 100 for the residential, and for commercial, that's flip side, it's a 0 and 100 for the normalized energy usage. So the reference point is the energy code at 1975. If the energy consumption of the building, which is compliant to the 1975 energy code, if that's 100, what is the next energy code compliant building would be? So it's gotten better, so it is reducing. That's really encouraging news. But like it gotten it's really better here, but then recently the improvement is very marginal, because of many different reasons, because we already did all the easy part, and now it's kind of hard to do more on top of it. But if you think about the long-term goal, like by 2030, like AIA and those architect organizations is saying the goal is net zero by 2030, then we have a long way to go. So we are like a 53 and 40 something right now. So in other words, it means that we have reduced like half of the energy consumption compared to the buildings that was complied to the 1975 energy code. And then for today's topic, 2018 IECC, so there's a web version of the code book. So our website has a link to this site, but this is actually the ICC link. So you can go to this web and then navigate the 2018 ICC code book. And this is actually very useful if you try to find us one specific one. You can use the search function and it will show you all those sections that has the keyword that you entered and it highlights. So it's different from the physical book, but we thought this is also very useful. So commercial provisions of the IECC 2018. So first, we would like to talk a little bit about the highlights of the changes before we go into all the item by item changes that Ryan will cover later. So highlights of this commercial provisions. Actually, there's no significant improvement in energy efficiency. If you remember the graph that we just looked at, it's just like a little bit, not much. And the initial estimate is maybe it's between 2 and 5% improvement compared to 2015 IECC. And so there's some reshuffling in mechanical section. I'm not sure about you guys, but personally for me, it was hard for me to try to find the right section in the 2015 because all different equipment has under different sections. Now they reshuffled to make it a little easy to navigate. So all the provisions for same type of equipment or system is in the same section. So not necessarily like a big change, but it's just reshuffling. And then there's additional efficiency package options. So to be comply with the commercial provisions of 2018 IECC, you have 3 options, right? You can either go to the ASHRAE 90.1 2016 route, or you can go to prescriptive route, or you can do performance route. And then for the prescriptive route, you need to meet all the mandatory and prescriptive provisions. On top of that, you need to pick one additional efficiency package, right? So those additional efficiency package includes more efficient HVAC, reduced LPD, enhanced lighting control, on-site renewable, and dedicated outdoor system, and high efficiency domestic hot water. So that was 2015 list, and now 2018, 2 were added to that additional efficiency package. One is the enhanced envelope performance, and the second one is reduced air infiltration. So those are one of the additional efficiency package if you follow the
Could
prescription.
you kind of go through that again? One more
Oh,
time?
okay.
The different options are, I was trying to follow it on here.
Sure, okay, so first one is more efficient HVAC.
No, before that, you said the ASHRAE.
Oh, okay, so it's three compliance path under commercial provisions of IECC. First,
Is that on your handout?
actually not. I was just explaining to go to this point.
That's been in like the other ones,
Yeah.
Right, so this is not a change. So we did
So the
it.
first one is
ASHRAE 90.1. So if you are under 2018 ICC, then it's ASHRAE 90.1 2016. So you can either follow that path, and the second path is you pick the prescriptive path under 2018 ICC commercial. And then third path is that you pick the performance base. That's like energy modeling. And this additional efficiency packages are for the second path that I mentioned, the prescriptive path, you need to meet all the prescriptive paths, and you need to pick one additional efficiency package. And these 2 items are added to that additional efficiency package.
We don't see too many locations using 90.1, particularly because of additional metering requirements and additional outlet receptacle controls.
Right.
So that's one that we don't see used too frequently
Right.
unless required by state law. So if you're a state facility, then you have to use 90.1.
Right.
But it is an option if, typically where we'll see that is if someone has a building that might be considered semi-heated,
Right.
which IECC does not have that classification of building. You're either conditioned or not, that's it.
So it'd be like the rim rates, I think is probably what you and I see most all the time. I don't see any ash rates coming through.
I'm talking commercial, rim rate not be on commercial.
Right.
Commercial's typically gonna be your ComCheck or other
Energy path.
simulated.
About the only time I see the ASHRAE is if they've gone through and they couldn't get it to comply another way, and ASHRAE has a more relaxed, I can't think of an example, but there's a couple of places where ASHRAE has a lower standard than prescriptive.
So under, if they do, say we did a warehouse with a box, and they can't, if they do it under the IECC, then it's either non-heated, like the warehouse area is either unconditioned or conditioned. What about, and you say you can't do semi,
Semi-heated is not a classification in IECC, that's an ASHRAE 90.1 only classification.
So how do you deal with the sprinkler system and having enough heat in the building just to maintain sprinklers from not freezing?
And that's where it goes back to the definition of what is conditioned. IECC for unconditioned does have a classification, which I think we'll touch on.
It's not,
A-
it doesn't exceed so many.
It is a low
Right.
energy.
Yeah.
Low energy
Yeah.
building.
Seems like that was one of them that ASHRAE was more flexible on getting an unconditioned. Seems like their number or something was a
Yeah,
little
well,
easier to meet.
yeah, and that's where ASHRAE, they have that semi-heated, which falls between the unconditioned and the conditioned, so they have that
Whereas
semi-heated.
IECC does have an area that defines non-conditioned, but it does have some allowance in there for a
Right.
little bit of,
3.4
Yeah,
BTU.
IECC has only one cutoff point where ASHRAE has 2. So if you have that middle spot, then you might see an ASHRAE compliance.
so then the additional efficiency, these are the additional efficiencies, the 2 different efficiency packages, they have to follow these.
This is part of prescriptive
Prescriptive
path
Right.
only. So if you're doing performance, so if you're doing a performance, a simulated energy model, then you're in a different, and these don't apply to that.
And that would be like if they do the ComCheck.
It may be a ComCheck or it may be a E.Quest model or
Right,
some
some
other
kind of
energy
model.
simulation. So, yeah, ComCheck can do either prescriptive or performance, so that's something to be aware of.
Right, right.
There's sprinklers down there, you have an issue, they go with dry system. You have to push.
All right, and then there's some language change for the controls. So it used to say control shall be capable of something. And now 2018 ICC, now it says shall be configured. Meaning that yes, of course it should be capable, but then yes, of course it should be programmed to do the job. It's not like can you do it or not do it, it's like you gotta do it. So that's a slight language change. And then there's a new appendix in the commercial provisions. It's called Solar Ready Zone. So in residential provision, it's been there. So 2015 ICC has this Solar Ready Zone in residential, but it's new to commercial in 2018. So this is like optional appendix for future solar installation. So it is not mandatory. It's there if any communities or jurisdiction wanted to use it. It's there for the future solar system. And then lastly, we want to briefly mention about the changes in ASHRAE 90.1 2016 because as we discussed, this is one of the paths that you can follow under 2018 IECC commercial provisions. So two big changes that I want to highlight is one is the climate zone map. So ASHRAE 90.1 2016 updated their climate zone map, but 2018 ICC did not. So there's a gap. So if you do 2018 ICC, there's no change in climate zone, but if you follow the ASHRAE path, then climate zone has changed, especially for the 6 counties in Illinois, these Calhoun, Clark, Coles, and these counties used to be 5A, now it's 4A, meaning that it's getting warmer and warmer, so the boundary is going up and up. So that's the change. And then second one that we want to highlight under ASHRAE 90.1 2016 is that there's a new performance-based compliance path. It's called Appendix G. So Appendix G has been there forever, and then it was typically used for the LEED building. So it was not the code compliance path, but it's called like a performance. If you want to apply for the LEED or Energy Star or other performance-based, rating system, this is their guideline to how to build the energy model and stuff. But that was not a compliance path. So doesn't mean if you even pass the Appendix G and show the improvement of your proposed building, that didn't mean that you complied with the code. But from 2016 ASHRAE 90.1, that is now part of the compliance path. So this could be used as to show the compliance to the ASHRAE 90.1 2016. And then there's some admin changes in the commercial provision. First one that we want to talk about is the mixed residential and commercial buildings. So it used to say in the 2015 ICC is a mixed occupancy. Now they're calling mixed buildings. I'm not sure. I think they try to kind of, not to confuse, but actually they are confusing a heck more. So what it is, before it says a mixed occupancy of both residential and commercial occupancy. That's the mixed occupancy definition. Now they're saying that mixed building, mixed residential and commercial buildings, it's a building includes both residential and commercial building portion. So where it goes confusing is that the definition of residential building here in Illinois, except for Chicago, 3 or less stories, and if it's a permanently occupied habitant, it's a residential building. But it's more than 3, like a 4, 5, 6. It's called commercial building. But what if you have a first floor commercial and second, third, fourth, fifth residential? According to this language, it kind of puts you that it is a mixed building. So therefore, the residential part follows the residential provisions, and the commercial part follows the commercial provision, which doesn't quite make sense to me. So if I can sum up a little bit differently, so if I have a 10-story building, one is all residential, floor 1 to 10, that's commercial building, because that's taller than 3 story. But if I have a 10-story building, all the way residential, but I have 1 floor of a commercial, now I have a mixed building, and the residential part follows the residential provision, and commercial part follows the commercial provisions. That's how it is. If you have any opinion or question, but currently that's how it reads. So I don't have an answer, but I know in practice, the taller building just considered as commercial building. That's what I know, but the code language, it is a little confusing. Yes?
So under the 15 right now, if I've got a 4-story building, commercial on the first floor, 3 levels of commercial.
I mean, you mean residential.
Then it's all considered commercial. I follow the commercial provisions.
Well, appears to be,
Yes.
but then the 2015 it says occupancy, mixed occupancy. So if you have a residential occupancy in the mixed occupancy building, you follow each provision. So even then was a little confusing, but this part is
Yeah.
also,
Where it goes back to is particularly the envelope.
Yeah,
Is looking at it from the envelope is, once you are past 3 stories in the 2015, you are a commercial building, done.
once I'm past 3 stories, period, of anything, or past 3 stories of residential.
Once you're past a 3-story building. So once you
in
have a
Illinois, not in
4th floor,
Chicago.
Yeah,
you are commercial.
okay,
You are a commercial building.
and I
Now,
follow all that.
Now, when you're inside and you're within the occupancy, then you can say, okay, I need residential lighting in the residential occupancy, but as far as the shell, that is a commercial shell.
Okay, and then, and with the 2018, is it basically still the same?
Now they are saying instead of mixed occupancy, they are saying mixed buildings, which puzzles us. That does that mean the building envelope, it's the residential building portion?
Right.
But to me, is that then the envelope of those 5-story residentials would be treated as residential.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the way I read it too.
And then the other 5 commercial.
Well, but is it
Because
the
otherwise,
building,
why the change?
but is the building envelope, do you just still treat the building envelope as a commercial? In other words, when I-
According to how they have changed
To the
it,
language
it is
utilized.
whatever that occupancy is, it is that that is that portion of the building. So your residential portion is residential.
so if I have commercial 1 floor, 4 or more residential levels, I treat everything from the residential up as residential.
It is
About the building
residential
envelope?
and the commercial is commercial. So you could end up with an envelope with 2 different criteria in a single envelope, which
But
to me is a little weird.
Right, so we don't know if that's the intention of this change, but just reading the changed language, that's how it appears
How do
to
we
me.
find out? What's
Oh, okay,
We're
so
gonna-
we're gonna
we're
have
gonna
a meeting with CDB and all the, advisory council. We'll bring this point up and ask for the clarification.
Are these Illinois changes, or are these?
No, this is actual
ICC?
ICC change.
Okay.
Part of
Because I've got a 1-story commercial
Mhm.
and a 5-story
Right.
residential coming in, and we're gonna let them go under the 2018 ICOs all across.
I see.
And my concern is, or the question is, if you treat it as a separate,
Mhm.
when you're doing, then you're dealing, because commercially, you wouldn't do a blower door test for the envelope.
Yep.
But then on the residential part above, you're gonna do blower door test. And if those are open for whatever, if they're open units out, open to the outside, then each unit's gonna have its own blower door test. Correct?
Yeah.
Well, you could test the entire residential section as one
If I had.
entity.
If they were all within if all the doors, front doors to these residentials were going into a 4-door or
Yeah.
within the envelope.
Yep.
But not if they're outside.
So it's like a stairwell to each one. then you're-
Right,
Yep.
if it's an open stair.
Individual resident.
Yep. Yep. That's
Well,
that.
But that's
And
very.
these are
You know, you're talking a blower door test, one compared to maybe 70 or something, you know?
Yeah.
That's-
Likely what we're going to end up having to do on that is we're actually going to have to pull the ICC amendment proposal to figure out what was, because we could see this being, it was a lot easier before when the whole envelope is commercial and we're done, we're under one code for the envelope, rather than, well, this first story
Then it negates
envelope
the
is
whole
this and
process.
this, and once you're within a space, it's much easier, but when you're dealing with the envelope,
Well,
that
just-
can be problematic.
Just as an opinion there, I mean, no matter what comes through Illinois, that you said you're talking to the ICC, because it would be my opinion that if this is an ICC code, you'd have to go by their opinion of it, because it is mandated by, so if the ICC says, no, that's exactly the intent,
Testing your residential, we actually have an Illinois amendment,
Then
which
I'd say
may
you-
help.
you'd have to go through and correct that in your Illinois amendment of if the ICC
Right.
says, yes, that's the intent.
Correct.
You don't want it that way, you have
Correct.
to correct it out then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that would be, and unfortunately, that would not get corrected for the 2018. It would be the 2021 code that
Well,
would
but
be
I don't
correction.
care if it's the intent, it's gonna be changed, I'm gonna allow it.
Yeah,
Because these people are already, they're in the design phase and they need to know what their costs are and all that sort of thing.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
but-
might just tell them, stick with the 15 energy code part.
Yeah.
Because technically, Illinois is not gonna adopt is not gonna change their amendment until 2019, so.
Right.
Or later.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's one, I suppose, benefit that I
Yeah.
see of ICC is they allow the code officials to look at something and
Well,
say,
yeah.
let's make a good judgment call on this.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they design, like you said, if they said, hey, we'll just cut all your stuff, do it by the 2015 and you're safe,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Okay, sorry to.
No,
No,
this is a good discussion, and this is exactly what we wanted to hear from you. And so, you know, when we talk to CDB or council members, we
Yeah.
can kind of, convey your ideas too. All right, so there's a slight language change in the, building documentation, closeout submittals. So the record document, compliant document shall be provided to the owner within 90 days of certificate of occupancy, and also training shall be provided. And inspection used to say remain accessible and exposed, now it says visual and accessible. Not a huge change, but they're trying to clarify things. And then thermal, so the inspections, it used to say framing and roughen inspection, and now it says thermal envelope inspection. And then there are some definition changes, and one is air barrier, nothing big, but they added, to clarify, it should be continuous, but they added this to make sure that it is continuous air barrier. And then this one I want to highlight, approved. 2015 IECC used to say approval by the code official as a result of investigation and tests conducted by him or her or by nationally recognized organization. That was a definition of approved. Now it's simply say acceptable to code officials. So if you guys say okay, then that is approved. So you guys have more autonomy and responsibilities on this section. So I see lots of smiles, so I guess this is a good news. All right, and then fenestration, just minor technical thing. They added the definition of skylight and vertical fenestration. That's it. And then now we're going to talk about item by item, and Ryan will take over from here.
Hey,
Give her a break.
I'm going to say, I have you doing national laboratory testing in order to get to approve something. So, some of these we'll hit on a little further. Some of them, we'll just kind of go through as far as things like this, where they've now added a category for insulated rolling or insulated metal of rolling variety, where it just was insulated metal of any type before. So added an additional category to make compliance a little easier to achieve. This is what we talked about earlier with the low energy building. I believe this threshold is the same between IECC and ASHRAE for what is basically considered unconditioned. Now with this, if you're below this threshold, then the thermal envelope requirements of the code don't apply. You still have to comply with all your lighting and all the other stuff, but your thermal envelope does not have to comply. So you don't have to have your R30 insulation and so on and so forth.
So this is the low energy for the heating, or the not the light.
Correct, this is
Or
heating,
skylights are required.
heating and air conditioning only.
Okay, yeah. As far as skylights, that's an electrical for where if you're over 25.
Skylights, yeah, that's
This is
typically in
lighting.
daylight response controls, yeah, that's,
Okay.
yeah, this is just the thermal envelope, the C401s.
And this is the same language down.
Correct.
This is
So
correct.
if you notice that we have a little section that says
Yeah.
envelope C421.1,
Yeah,
if it's
in-
black,
Yeah.
then it means that it's not a change, but we want to just emphasize
Right,
it. But
right.
if
Yeah.
it's white, it means it's a change.
Okay. Oh, I see.
So yeah, this is currently how it's written. This wasn't a change, but we've come up with, had a fair number of questions come up regarding this, and so wanted to make sure to bring this forward is, if you can get a building to be within, under this 1 watt per square foot, which that's a pretty low bar to get under.
Well, that's what they put on the paper anyway, so,
Well, and
I mean,
but that's where when you look at what's your HVAC system, saying, okay, what's your peak load on it?
yeah.
1 watt per square foot or, 3.4 BTUs per hour per square foot, that's a pretty low bar to hit.
Yeah.
But, again, that's one where someone's like, I really don't want to have to deal with this. Well, okay, here's your bar.
Yeah.
That's a choice. For heated slabs, I don't know how frequently you encounter this, but with heated slabs, you now have to have insulation of an R5 continuous under the slab. Now, this is a missed opportunity that I see. This is one place to make a building better, is it requires an R5. When we go to an R10, it's like 30 cents a square foot more. Like, to me, that's one of those, but I realize that you can't require it, but saying, hey, if you want to build a better building and a warmer floor.
Can you stay at that slide for a second? I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
if you're done. So, dealing with the slab on grade insulation requirements, if it's going to be prescriptive or if they're going to plug it into a model
Mhm.
to where they have that, the continuous 2 feet, either horizontal or vertical of R10.
Mhm.
So let's just pretend that they're going with the vertical R10 on this issue here.
Okay.
If they did it that way, do you see any issue with that detail?
As far as,
If that was my detail for showing the R10 continuous 2 feet horizontal, and then it was going up to the wall like that, to where I'd have or maybe that instead of that.
do you mean this 2 feet coming down or this 2 foot
The 2 foot going horizontal.
2 foot here,
That's
okay.
my
slab on grade?
insulation.
Okay.
Okay, and that's typically how you'll see that detail. And then I'll have my wall would probably be where the concrete wall, stem wall is there.
Yeah.
That might be an actual framed wall
Uh-huh.
with insulation in that. Okay.
Okay.
You see how you have that gap?
He's talking about the caulk gap.
Right there.
I'm talking about the.
Oh, sure thing.
This is always an issue we come across, you see details. This right here,
Uh-huh.
there's no,
Thermal bridge right there.
right.
Yep.
So we've always told, this has to go up and then come up to the slab,
Yeah.
either that way or they can bevel it.
Bevel it, yeah.
And then this would be my wall. if you
Yeah.
will.
Now, I believe
So
that yeah,
doesn't meet the code.
thermal bridge is definitely a problem. Now, I believe the code book actually has some insulation detailing.
And it does, it's
For
like
that.
But
Kevin
that one
said.
doesn't meet the code, is what I'm asking.
Oh, he's
That
meeting,
detail. And
This
that's
is-
because it's slab on, maybe that's acceptable because it's
Well, because this is
Heated slab.
yeah. Well, this is a heated slab, so they're looking at this insulation down here. Well,
Yeah.
this is below grade.
Right.
So you've insulated that wall from grade, but yeah, there is definitely a potential for a thermal bridge if these do touch and there's not some kind of a joint
Well,
between the two.
technically, like Kevin said, and I agree with him, they should, that L there coming through that slab should be the full insulation, chamfered at the top to go back, and the
Yeah.
insulation at the wall intersects it above, right?
Well, and even at the very least, make sure there's a thermal break between those two concrete
Mhm.
pieces.
There's-
Well, there is a thermal break right now, so I'm looking at that, or,
But it's not insulated,
Yeah.
what you're saying.
So there's,
when I say thermal break, I mean, it's not, there's not thermal all over.
a thermal break to me is
You can't-
they are not in physical contact with one another, where you cannot transfer heat by conduction directly from one to the other. Whether that's whether that's a control joint, filler, or there needs to be something between those
But
two
it's not,
slabs.
it's not an insulation as per
It's
our
not an
10,
insulation,
you do
correct.
2 foot back, or that, yeah, but if
Correct.
I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, if they do the energy modeling on the residential,
Yeah.
they may be able to get by without that.
No, I know, that's what I said,
Oh,
but if it's
okay.
required to be,
Oh, yeah,
And
it's
and
required to
again,
be, yeah.
you know, as we all know, code will allow you to build a bad building.
right.
You can build something that's not going to perform well. It meets minimum code. Right. So, here's another one for if you do have continuous insulation, you now require a minimum of 2 layers. Now, for us being an R30, even if you're using polyiso at an R6, that's what, 5 inches of insulation? So yeah, looking at roof insulation. So that would be, 5 inches of insulation. I think the highest they make it is 4, so you already have to have 2 layers just in order to meet your code anyway. So
So.
it's a change, but for us, probably not in
So
practicality.
now so if I have an R30 or whatever if I'm going prescriptive, I'm gonna have an R30 unless they change that.
Yep.
I have to have 2 layers.
That
no matter
R30
what.
must be broken into a minimum of 2
Minimum
layers.
2 layers, okay. And lap the seams and all that.
Correct, yeah.
But
So
they
for
have
us
to be-
being a 5, it might be a 3 and a 2, or 2 2.5s, or whatever
Do they
they
have
want to do.
to tape joint or any kind of, put anything on the seams at all?
It would be per the manufacturer's directions. I think that's part of the reason why they require that the seams be lapped and all of that, so you don't end up with air that just travels right through the seam.
I meant like the top layer though, would that have to?
Typically, that's on the
You're
roof.
looking, that's on the
So
manufacturer.
it would have
That's-
an active barrier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably right.
Yep.
You're right, okay.
So, again, they're trying to prevent the seam going all the way from the membrane all the way to your roof deck. Skylight curbs now have a minimum of R5 or the roof value, whichever is lower. So, unless they've already had it listed and labeled, and then you're done. So this is just for your curbs. Masonry walls with integrated insulation. Before, you couldn't count the integrated insulation at all. They now allow you, if you use the U value table, you can provide an allowance to use that insulation value of integrated insulation for CMU. Now, you can't use the R value table. It must be the U value table.
Okay, and then you, in the IRC, whether you're using a prescriptive or modeling, you can use the R value table or U value table,
Correct.
Either one?
Correct. Yeah, they are interchangeable, but you have to use one or the other.
Okay.
But at least with this, you now have a path where before, I don't care if you put insulation in your CMU wall, you don't get to count it. So now you at least have the ability to count it. Added a definition and specs for a mass wall, a mass floor. If that floor is part of your thermal envelope, I don't know how many people actually use the mass of the floor for their thermal envelope itself, but
I've seen anybody do that. Usually it's the perimeter.
yeah. So, but you can now, and they've provided a definition of, has to be a minimum of 35 pounds per square foot in order to qualify as a mass floor, which, for concrete is not very much to get 35 pounds.
In dealing with that, with can that really be a pro or negative factor if they use that in the application? Do you know?
I'm not even sure why you would end up, because typically when you deal with mass floors, they don't have much in the way of insulating value themselves.
Yeah.
So it's a change.
It's a change.
It provides information, but as far as that, typically where I'd see mass floors might be if you're dealing with passive house.
Mm-hmm.
But even there,
Using it as a heat sink.
you're using it as a heat sink. But again, your thermal envelope is the insulation that's underneath
And
it.
then
So it's. For below grade walls, now using C factor, and including C factor, which is really just an inverse of U, but C factor being the contact factor. So it's transmission via contact and conductivity, where R value is typically an R per inch. This is just, it's based on the surface area, period. If someone decides to use air spaces as thermal insulation, the code now recognizes that as a potential, but it does specify that in order to qualify, that airspace, that cavity has to be enclosed, unventilated, and sealed. So you can't have any air transfer between it if you're going to use that air as a thermal, for its thermal value. As minimal as air has a thermal value. Something you guys may start to see is, as people do more and more daylighting, the code has now increased skylight allowable area from 5% up to 6%.
Centers clubs really make use of that. And the longer you move down there, it's lighting saving over that is something.
Yeah, Sam's, Walmart, most of those stores, they now, a lot of them, a lot of commercial is making more and more use of this. Bigger commercial retail, particularly because they find that natural light increases sales. So if I put skylights in, my sales go up. Which, it's nice to, even here where we've got windows.
I don't mind be jumping here, but just kind of question came my
Sure.
head. If I'm dealing with of course they don't, like with the ASHRAE, if I'm dealing with a warehouse building,
Uh-huh.
big box, big store, so they do a lot of warehouse type
Yeah.
facilities in our area, or then it turns into an Amazon facility,
Yep.
Of course, now everything's going LED to get under the wattage to
Yep.
be able to eliminate having skylights. The requirement, is that same exception in the ASHRAE that it is in the IECC as far as the exception of having to have skylights to have the less than 0.5 square? Is that the same? Or is there?
I can't recall off the top of my head at the moment. We might touch on that. If
Okay.
not, let me know at the end and we can come back to it. Because that's something that anytime you guys, if you do have questions or email us, first thing that I'm doing is pull out the code book and look up what is my code reference to give you, here is where the essence of the code actually is. So that's something that we do try to provide. And that's where we are here to be a service, service to you guys.
Oh, I've got a set of plans to talk about later.
So, excellent. We look forward to it.
In addition, of course, it's always, when you're adding a building to another building.
Yeah.
Those big warehouses down bottom, are a lot of them going with these increased skylights for the daylight?
They don't use skylights, no,
It's just all LED.
well, we don't like the skylights, number one, because of, fire stuff, but, no, it's, they just put.
Low power density and
Yeah. they put
away you go. Yeah.
Just curious, I just noticed a difference in like our new, the
Well,
sand
yes,
club
those,
versus the
they're
old
gonna put them
ballpark.
in because of
They're retail
their
establishment.
retail and,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
Yep, so that goes back to that retail and natural light. So, again, products continue to get better. So solar heat gain values have decreased a little bit, a couple of percent. Daylight zones, some of this, they mark a lot of changes in the code because of daylighting, primarily because they've changed from skylights to top lit. And instead of windows, they're now vertical fenestration. Okay. But there is some, again, guidance on this. Anytime you get a set of plans, this is something that maybe I missed it. Anytime you guys get a set of plans, these daylight zones should be pre-marked on it. If not, send it back and tell them they need to mark the daylit zones, because that goes back into your lighting and power requirements, daylight harvesting controls, et cetera, et cetera. So if they have skylights or windows, these zones need to be marked and should be marked on the plans. Air sealing, I think we've probably kind of already realized that buildings expand and contract and shift a little bit. So the air sealing needs to be done to allow for that expansion and contraction. So that's part of, with tapes and fluid applieds and things that have a little bit more give. So when the building does shift a little bit, you haven't broken all your air seals and end up with a bunch of leaks. Door types, added a new category for the power-operated sliding doors and such. Now we're seeing more and more, whole walls of glass that can move. So added a new category for that to the tables. And here we go into a couple of case scenarios. So I want to get your feedback as far as, okay, here's what we're looking at. Does that fit? Does it not fit with? Because there's a few of us in the office that answer these questions, but we'd love the feedback from the guys who actually get to put their stamp on it and say, this is my decision, period. So, Sumi?
So throughout the presentation, we kind of try to break it up a little bit because it's a long session, and we kind of inserted this slide, if you see this orange, table, this is a question and answer or discussion point or question to you. So one of the questions that came through our support line was, how does the code apply to a proposed building without heating or cooling? I recall this was something like a warehouse type of building, so they said, we're not going to have any heating, we're not going to have any cooling. Do I need to meet the energy code in terms of envelope and stuff? So we said, well, you may qualify as a low energy building now, so you don't need to follow the envelope provision. But what if down the road the building renovates and they will include the heating and cooling later? So then it'll be a problem for them because there's a slab insulation, requirement, all kind of, it'll be very difficult to do it afterward. So the question came in and you said, yes for now, but watch out. You may want to consider the future, ramification of this.
This was a one that came in. Someone said, I'm building a shell. Do I have to comply? And they're going to build it out later. We said, if all you're building is the shell, you're technically a low energy building. But
you do the finish.
If you say you can't put more than 1 watt per square foot because you're a low energy building, that could impact who your future tenant might be.
That's why when we're dealing with the shell permits, when we issue these shell permits, I make them stay on the plans that the future lighting and stuff can't exceed the 0.5. I address that ahead of time, because you know it's going to have some lighting in there. It's got to have lighting, whether it's just warehouse or if it could end up being some sort of manufacturing or a small assembly or something like that. The other thing too is, of course, they usually sometimes they don't do slab on grade insulation, and that's come back to bite them big time where they've had to increase I mean, not just come in and add R10 to the mass walls, but increase that and then also save the roof.
Okay. So it sounds like you're kind of on the same page that
Well,
we are.
for us on the shell construction, it's exactly that. It's a shell. They'll never get an occupancy permit for it until they do a finish, and then everything that finish would require. If you're going to call this low energy and storage, then finish it like that. If you're not, if it's just shell, you got to strip mall. I got no problem with that. And then whenever you get a tenant in there, now it's going to be an occupancy. Now you have to go by whatever standards needed for that lighting or heating. Or
Well, generally they'll block out areas that's going to be office park, which would be future. So they'll insulate the roof for that area.
Yeah.
And then just take and then on the inside, and then for the tenant build out, they'll take the walls, separating they'll thermal envelope basically the walls between the warehouse and take it all the way to the roof deck to isolate that. And then also they have to deal with meeting all the NFRC information requirements for the fenestrations for their storefront portion.
One thing I want to mention is that, in the answer part, we kind of put the section number. These are based on 2015 IECC because these are questions that we got. So it's not a change, but I don't believe throughout the question and answer section there's things that would change the answer based on, changes under 2018. So, but this is just experience, this is just a discussion point, but the section number is based on 2015 IECC.
If you had any issues, I don't know if anybody else has, we do, let's say you get a little strip mall building, you're going to have 5 units of whatever in there, and then they take and, the one end unit, they're going to put this QYZ retail store in, so they get the 3 outside walls to comply. That separation wall between tenants would also make them, just not going to leave the insulation open on that back side, because until you finish it, that's an exterior wall. Because the place is not heated or conditioned or open, so.
If I'm doing a strip mall or a strip building, something like that, the whole building envelope has to comply.
Okay, but I mean separation between the units, so the envelope complies.
Yeah, there's no requirement for separation between units.
No, but what I'm getting at, when they do the finish of this one, okay, that wall is still open on the back side for insulation to work. Well, I take that back. If you've done the complete envelope.
No, it's a complete envelope, so whatever they put on.
With the drywall on the inside, of all 4 walls.
Well, it may not be drywalled yet, but.
Well, that's what I mean, so the drywall would be required to complete the envelope.
Not necessarily.
As long as they've been insulated.
Yeah.
Again, it's where is your thermal boundary? If you've finished it all the way around, then it's all the way out.
Okay,
But
up
if
to
it's
the
not,
front,
then
back, yeah,
you could
okay.
have because that's where the thermal boundary must be continuous and between conditioned
Yeah,
and
but your
unconditioned.
insulation is required to be covered on all 6 sides,
Well,
right?
only, yeah.
That's where I'm going with it.
No. not really.
Depending on the type of insulation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, so if you're a closed cell foam, you're fine, as long as it's covered. But if you're not a closed cell foam and you're doing fiberglass insulation, then does not that have to be covered on all 6 sides?
Not, no.
Yeah.
Fiberglass, I think, manufacturer
Fiberglass
says-
because it's air permeable insulation.
Yeah, but it doesn't have, okay.
All right.
For it to work is that, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking for it to work for that outside wall. Because, I mean, we get them like that too. They'll just put the insulation up, but they're only doing the one unit. So I say,
Right.
okay, then on the back side of the one wall where there's nothing else, drywall that wall and seal it up. But,
Well, they're gonna have a 10-inch separation. It's not gonna be rated or required.
No.
But they will have a 10-inch separation. That 10-inch separation is generally drywall, and that would essentially act as the same.
yeah, but with just the air permeable insulation on it, then that negates the thermal envelope if it's air
Yeah,
permeable.
but I
That's
mean,
what I was.
they're generally not
Well,
gonna, they're gonna be filled within
Yeah.
with less than a
Usually,
year,
with
so
yeah,
I'm not
most of the
worried
time,
about
right,
that.
right. I've only had one in there. I think we had one old gardener's projects that had,
Well,
that sat there,
it's-
yeah,
yeah.
sat there for 3 years without it being finished. It's-
All right. So net zero.
So next quick question. So I believe this was from architect, and then I'm building a net zero building with all the bells and whistles, geothermal and net roof area, roof mounted photo panels. And do I need to comply with the code? So the simple answer is yes. But if your building is a low energy building and it qualifies, you don't need to meet the envelope and stuff, but you still need to comply with the electrical and lighting provision. So it's a simple question, but then it just baffled us a little bit because they're saying, we are doing all the bells and whistles, but do we really need to do the minimum? So we found this interesting. And then we're gonna talk about a little bit more HVAC. Maybe we need to speed up a little bit because we're a little behind.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something, they've added some additional specifications to this. I don't know how many of you encountered this yet, as far as isolating combustion appliances. So if you're using outside air for combustion, water heaters, furnaces, and the like, to make sure that that is now considered outside of the building, and making sure that you thoroughly isolate that. Now this was amended out in the 2015, and they are proposing to again amend this back out for 2018 and hold this back out. Meanwhile, I look at it and say, well, just install sealed combustion, high efficiency, and you're done. And you're going to save a bunch of money too in the long run. But so equipment efficiency, they continue slowly but surely to increase that. The biggest difference is for window shakers and window units is they've now changed from EER to CEER. So that takes into account when the unit is on but not running, that energy loss too. But as you can also see, they have increased it substantially from 9.8 up to 10.9. So this is a substantial improvement in efficiency for woo! We gained a whole 2%. So equipment efficiency minimum going from 78 up to 80% efficient now. So for boilers, can't have constant operating pilot lights on small boilers anymore. And also, they now must do temperature reset. So temperature setback for outdoor air or some other load methodology. Now that there is an exclusion if they're providing tankless domestic hot water off that boiler, then you don't have to do your temperature reset on that. But again, controls tend to continue to get better and cheaper. And so looking at saying, well, what's cost effective? Putting this on, a lot of boilers just come with this by default. So, anything less than 300,000 BTUs an hour. So, a lot of commercials getting to that point too. I don't know too many people that run into this, but if you have closed loop systems that then do heat rejection, so rather than doing geothermal, doing heat rejection using a cooling tower for closed loop systems, this might be on your larger commercial systems. New section, and looking at the control of the pump and the valve as far as, during the winter time, how do I isolate that out so I'm not losing all that extra energy in the winter when I'm not trying to reject heat. VFDs, again, these keep getting better, cheaper, so it's used to be 10 horse and smaller, it's now, or 10 horse and larger, it's now down to 2 horse and larger for pumps. They do have an increased allowance for buildings that have a building automation system that can do a little bit more control, which that allows you to go up to 5 or 7.5 horse without a VFD for that. Again, these are getting so cheap, and a lot of utilities have good rebates on them. People look at it and say, it's the same price whether I buy a starter or a VFD. I'll just buy the VFD and I'm done. Airflow for VAV systems, reducing the minimum airflow from 30% down to 20%. In this orange triangle down towards the bottom, this is where you are overcooling and then reheating. So I'm now paying to move the air, I'm paying to cool the air, and I'm paying to reheat the air, and then putting it back into space. So I paid 3 times to have no real added benefit. So as you can tell, the area of that orange triangle diminishes substantially just by going from a 30% turn down to a 20% minimum airflow. So this can also play a role as far as sizing of equipment, because if people oversize their equipment, you're going to have a problem reaching these turn down levels. Parallel flow VAVs, so if you got fan powered VAV boxes, there's additional control requirements. How many of you run into much of this for any of your designs? I was figuring there weren't too many that this runs into. Ventilation controls. There's now, this is now mandatory. It used to be prescriptive. So going through, there's a lot of different areas, whether it's demand controlled ventilation. We've been getting a lot of questions lately regarding enclosed parking garages and ventilation. The fun part there is your energy recovery requirements for those systems then that you end up having to do. A lot of energy recovery kitchens, so a lot of your restaurant commercial kitchens now, they're adding requirements for, and then guest rooms, I think that's specifically 50 and larger as far as guest rooms. And then shut-off dampers, making sure they seal, or they actually seal when you close them. So this is one, if for any places that use dedicated outdoor air systems, making sure that the ventilation air is not overheated when you're trying to cool the building. Again, you just run into problems where you overheat your building if you overheat your ventilation air. And then talking energy recovery, this is one place where the code has gotten a little less stringent for 2018, where now these are for ventilation systems operating over 8,000 hours a year or nearly continuous operating, they now provide you some de minimis allowance for ventilation air without having to do energy recovery on it. Where previously the limit was 0. If you did the first CFM you moved, had to be energy recovery on it. Guest room, automatic controls. So this can either be done locally within the room. This is one way to do it that I've seen, where you just drop your key card in and it turns on. Typically it'll turn on, enable the lighting in the room, and it'll turn on the HVAC for you. Or you can do it via centralized guest control system, where the front desk, when you log into your room, says, oh, okay, there's someone here, go into occupied mode. But that's now required anytime you have units of 50 guest rooms or larger. So 50 guest rooms and larger, I don't know, would that just be a typical Motel 6 that would be that size, or I'm not sure if that would that hit your threshold, or?
The rest equals 100.
Okay. Holiday Inn, yeah. Okay. Okay. So you might run into some of these. All right. Pressure drop. This was more of a clarification in the table as far as your pressure drop allowance. Something else that needs to be on the prints is fan horsepower rating. Motor ratings for your fans need to be on the prints listed. However, those that are smaller than 1 horsepower don't have to be on there. So your fractional horsepowers don't have to be listed. Heat rejection, so your cooling towers and such. So adding a control scheme for that. So yeah, noting here is how it should be controlled. Fluid leaving temperature or pressure. So again, this is a pretty small threshold. Again, 5 horsepower or more total. So even if you have 5 1 horsepower fans, it still counts. Refrigeration, again, this is changed from prescriptive to mandatory. So that's something that you will see more and more of throughout this code, is more and more stuff is falling into mandatory. So it doesn't matter if you're doing energy model or prescriptive, you have to do it. Yeah, I think part of this is manufacturers continue to update their products too and say, rather than making one that does it and one that doesn't, I'll just make one that does and we're done, particularly because of Energy Star. Energy Star frequently continues to push that. Walk-in performance, this is one where it's a little strange in that this is a delayed implemented item. So this one doesn't come into play until 2020. So this is could be your convenience stores with walk-in beer coolers, or refrigerated cases that open up that have an area to walk in behind it. So this is new maximum energy consumption, and I've seen a lot of manufacturers just within the last year release a set of new products for this. So again, it's one of those, okay, is the code pushing the manufacturers or the manufacturers pushing the code? As far as HVAC construction, as Sumi mentioned, a lot of this was consolidated together. Again, more mandatory stuff, piping insulation, duct sealing, and the like. So, this, one question on air curtains.
So the question was, is the installation of an air curtain a suitable alternative to the vestibule requirement? And simple answer is yes. So according to the section, this is based on 2015 IECC, section C 42.57, exception 7 provides a technical specification of the air curtain, what kind of air curtain is, suitable for the alternative to the vestibule requirement. So that's that answer. And I think we are hitting like at 10:35, so maybe this is a good time to take a break. So how about like a 10-minute break? And then we will reconvene at 10:45. Thank you.
Water heaters. Now again, little tweaks to the table as efficiencies continue to get better. 2 new categories is tabletop water heaters, such as that depicted in the picture, and grid-enabled water heaters. Now, I don't know how many of you have experienced the tabletop water heaters. Those are a little bit of a unique beast. But
A little bit more common in actually the 40s and 50s. They had something similar to those.
no,
Just kind of went out of favor.
yeah. So the definitions that they put forward is the tabletop is an enclosed rectangular cabinet with a flat top surface not more than 3 feet. It basically looks like a countertop that sits next to your washer. So now the grid-enabled water heater has to be over 75 gallons and have an activation lock that has to be activated by the utility company as part of a demand response or thermal storage program. So that's one that it's available, but that's a little bit of a unique beast that we might see coming back. We have seen more and more demand response programs coming forward. So that's, right now that's unique, but you guys might start to run into that. Efficiency exception, a little bit of a wording change from on-site solar to on-site renewables. So if you have other renewables such as wind, that now qualifies where before it didn't. So a little bit of a interesting thing there. Heat traps, formerly just for water heaters. Now if you just have thermal hot water tanks, they now have to require heat traps. Here in the picture, that's a mechanical heat trap, or obviously they make devices that just go right in the line to provide that heat trap. But yeah, so any hot water storage tanks have to have them too.
Is the state plumbing inspector supposed to be enforcing that?
This is an energy code issue. So it's not that, I don't know if it's in the plumbing code or not, but
No.
again, it goes back to, so yeah, this is an energy code. This is your purview.
So this is the problem is we can't tell them to put that in there.
Right.
Because the plumbing guy,
Answers to the state plumbing
he
inspector.
will not listen to anything that we say.
We're not supposed to
plumbing
inspect plumbing.
Well, a lot of the water, not so much as storage tanks, but most of the residential water heaters already come with a heat trap pre-installed.
Yeah.
And I imagine that you're going to see more. Usually that's why they're color coded at the top, which tells you that there's an insert down in the dip tubes in the outlet that it's there. So
Yeah,
just be a matter of
it's
finding
just
it.
a device that's about the PA law
Yeah.
that normally is threaded in. But yeah, so now on hot water storage tanks, and this might be something that you might talk with, the plumbing inspectors and say, hey, there's now this state requirement for this. I don't know what, if it's not in the plumbing code, if it will be in the plumbing code.
I have seen that
Or
come up
not.
in the amendments that are coming up yet.
Yeah, but part of that is this is just for 2018 starting, so that's
true. So yeah.
There could be a lag time,
Yeah.
so we'll see. But the code now requires it, so. But yeah, you get into some of these weird ones.
But that was just for storage.
Storage tanks.
15
Previously,
water heaters.
water heaters have to have it, and most water heaters come with them, as was mentioned.
Most time, at least on residential, most time, now I haven't seen usually commercial, they just go with a bigger heater. So sometimes you'll see residents going with dual heaters. Most of them don't tend to run it parallel, they run them in series, so you've just got 2 regular water heaters that are probably compliant anyway.
Yeah. So, pool covers, increasing from 75 site recovered energy, or from 70 up to 75% site recovered energy, or you have to have a pool cover to prevent water loss.
If it's heated, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
What's that?
Well, if it's unheated, then 100% is renewable.
There you go. I got the high end one
There
here.
you go, 100% renewable energy. I call it just the sun and full. Used to be a requirement for solar water heating commissioning. That's now been removed for 2018. I don't know how complicated hot water systems tend to normally get. It's more on the boiler side.
Border side circuit insulation.
So this is an interesting one in that residential lighting provisions are now allowed only for multifamily commercial, which I'm not sure why you would have commercial that's falling within the, has residential, no. So, yeah, just multifamily residential portion applies, so you don't use the commercial lighting code in the residential
Okay, would it be
section.
the same for the 5 independent sections?
So
that
it's
they're leaning towards?
if you're in a residence, the residence lighting portion, or the
Which
residential
would be-
lighting code applies, not the commercial code in residential.
Which is only 75% high efficacy, you don't have to do any factors, you figure.
Yeah. Luminaire lighting level controls, we're now seeing more and more of this, where occupancy sensors and daylight harvesting built right into the fixture, you hang it and you're done, other than commissioning. Now it must include both occupancy and light sensing in order to qualify for this.
Maybe the, so basically the residential lighting restriction,
It means in the residential portion, you can't use the commercial code.
We're talking
Of the
about
lighting.
split buildings, you know.
for multifamily buildings.
Yeah.
For multifamily, but an apartment, or a hotel, that's gonna be.
Hotel is commercial.
Residence
Yeah.
being considered commercial, okay.
Yeah. Yep. Occupancy sensors, again, we continue to see these growing more and more. Open offices, warehouse storage areas, enclosed offices. You're getting to see it almost everywhere now. Time delay, used to be 30-minute, up to 30-minute delay before turning the lights off. Now it's 20 minutes. So getting a little bit shorter there. Which, you think about it, when you leave the room, how long do you really want the lights to stay on? Now, a good application of this is your bathroom fan, where after you leave, you might want it to stay on for 20 minutes. New exception for daylight responsive controls is if you are at least 40% below your required or your allowed threshold, which now for office space, that means you, in order to qualify for this, you'd have to be under 0.47 watts per square foot. So now you're talking even below that half a watt per square foot. You can still do that. Because, you think about now, they are now making troffer fixtures that exceed 125 lumens per watt. So you can easily hit 50-foot candles, even at under half a watt now. Again, calculation methodology for your roof monitors. So it's similar to your skylights. Sleeping rooms no longer can allow captive key systems for sleeping units. Key cards are fine, but you can't have captive key systems for it. I don't know how frequently you run into that one either. Exterior lighting controls, they've now expanded what it has to do. So it has to have daylight controls and timer controls. Now this could be part of the same unit, or it could be separate. Two controls in series. One does daylight and one does timer control. So, but you now have to have both. They now have lighting setbacks, so anytime after business hours, I believe they let you up to 1 hour after business, you can have your lighting on, but after 1 hour past business, your lighting has to come off. Now for security, they do provide some allowances for that too. Exit signs, power limits have been removed from the code. I think this is predominantly because everyone's gone to LED. And the difference between the best LED exit sign and the worst one is almost nothing anymore. So they looked at it and said, having this code requirement, it's not even doing anything anymore. Track lighting goes from 30 watts per foot down to 8 watts per foot. Mostly because everyone's putting up LED and fluorescent track lighting now. So this can help for your lighting power density calculations, because before, if you used any track lighting, it would really kill your calculation for you. Again, lighting keeps getting more efficient, so we're reducing our lighting or power requirement even further now. A little bit less in offices. Libraries have taken the biggest hit in this round. They are now just below the level of office lighting, which seems a little strange to me, but it is what it is. I mean, even at 0.78, with as good as fixtures are getting now, you can still produce a fair bit of light with that. Exterior lighting, they've now excluded more exterior lighting from the calculations as far as what your lighting power for exterior is. So here's where you guys come in. Approved lighting for safety considerations. So not just, yeah, I think it's safety. Like, yeah, no, is it? You guys get to have the say there. Emergency lighting, exit signs. So, national flag, light it up as much as you want.
10 million candle power.
There you go. Why not? Again, lighting power allowances keep getting lower and lower as fixtures keep getting better and better. About 30% lower. Now here, there's a big difference for Zone 1 and 2. Zone 1, developed areas of national parks, state parks, forest land, and rural areas. And Zone 2 is areas predominantly consisting of residential, neighborhood business districts, light industrial with limited nighttime use, and residential mixed use areas. And this is predominantly sales areas, saying, okay, in residential areas, I don't want a whole lot of sales going on. So I think that's a big reason why this drops so dramatically. Because at 0.04 watts per square foot, that's pretty low. I don't know how many of you have much in the way of natural gas lighting or propane lighting provided. Maybe some decorative outside lighting.
Decorative.
Maybe.
Freestanding stuff.
Yeah. No continuous pilots allowed on that anymore.
That's on permanent, right?
Hmm?
On permanent fixture.
Yes. Code applies to permanent installations.
Yeah.
Yes. That's stairwell. Yeah, this is kind of an important one.
So the question was about the stairwell lighting. The question was, is it acceptable for stairwell with no manual switches to have 100% of the lighting on occupancy sensor? So in terms of, our comment is all based on energy code. Our perspective is from energy code. So according to the energy code, most of the rooms are required to have occupancy sensor. And if you don't have occupancy sensor, then you are required to have time sensor, so timer type of. But stairwell is an exception to the time, so it's not included in the occupancy sensor requirement. but also it's exception for the timer-based control, meaning that there's no requirement for stairwell lighting. So you could have occupancy sensor, you could not have occupancy sensor, energy code doesn't tell you. But our concern is there might be some, safety issue there if it's 100% dark, even though there's nobody. So that's our, comment. And the second question related to the lighting was just quick and simple one. Our manual daylighting controls are permitted. And the short and sweet answer is no. The daylighting control should be daylight responsive control, meaning that sensor needs to detect the amount of daylight to control the electric light. So now we're going to talk about more power.
All right. Things keep getting better and better. Transformer efficiency is increased as motors. Transformers now required to be compliant with DOE 2016 requirements, Department of Energy 2016, and motors have to be a minimum of NEMA premium motors. Now transformers, this is where it's going to be very difficult, is because from looking at two transformers, you can't tell how efficient it is. It's generally not even on the label of the transformer, the efficiency rating. So this is one of those where this can be very difficult, and this could be something where you say, if you're going to do a submittal, you need to call that out somewhere so that I actually know where it is, rather than going through that mound of books that they love to put together for buildings. Now they're now making new extreme efficiency motors. Those are real easy to figure out, because as you can see, the new extreme or hybrid motors that they're calling them, which is permanent magnet and induction motor in one. Well, you can tell that one because it's a very different looking motor. But transformers is real hard to tell. Motors, at least they put the nameplate efficiency right on it, so it's real easy to identify if something's gone awry there. Probably not too many, maybe some escalators. Moving walkways, not so much. But variable voltage is another way to control those other than just requiring variable speed drives on those. All right, now we're getting into the enhancement efficiency packages. So for the envelope, you have to be at least 15% better than your allowed efficiency in order to qualify for this one. And for reduced infiltration, now, since we're talking commercial, the way to do this one is you have to test for air leakage. Commercial doesn't require testing as long as you have used one of the 17 approved materials. However, if you want, you can test your building and qualify for this exception. So, just a note on very large buildings, you have to test them a minimum of 1/4 of the square footage per test. So you can test big buildings in sections. Clarification, electrical vehicle charging does not count as part of the building's energy consumption, so it doesn't fall within your energy model, which makes sense because that's not building specific. Renewable energy credits, they are now limited as far as how much on-site renewables you can take credit for as part of your energy model, limited to 5%. And you can request the documentation of, okay, tell me about your system. How big is it? What's your production going to be? How much of a credit are you trying to take for this renewables? Previously, there was no limit, so you can end up with weird scenarios like this, which is a solar-powered greenhouse. And so you say, I have a really energy-intense building that is all glass, now I'll just put a bunch of solar on it to make it work out. So, talking energy use index and energy costs. So this is for your energy modeling.
So this is the part that I made a mistake and found out the mistake after I print a bunch of this. So if so the question was, is energy uses for performance-based compliance determined by the energy cost or the site energy? And the answer on your printout, it says, commercial application requires the energy cost, and the residential requires, residential you can choose between the site energy or the energy cost. That's the wrong answer. So cross that out. Okay, I will point it out. So correct answer is that both residential and commercial energy cost is the kind of default. That's the method that you're using to compare the performance between the baseline and your proposed. But in the commercial, you can actually use a site energy use if the jurisdiction use that as a comparison of metric in your community. So that's kind of it's included as the exception. So that's a commercial side. So the energy cost is the default. But if your community use a site energy, then you can use that metric. The residential energy cost is a default, but the source energy, not the site, so cross out the site part on your handout. The source energy could be used as a metric. So that's included as an exception. So no more confusion. So easy way to remember, cost is the default, but it could be either site energy on commercial and source energy in the residential. Yes?
Okay, for someone that's not familiar with that, and maybe some others are here, could you kind of go over what that means, that energy cost? Is that like
That's looking at pure dollars. So
So
that
that's-
is the dollars,
so that's the,
total dollars for natural gas.
Method?
No, this is a performance-based method. So when
Okay.
I said
So
that,
they do performance-based.
correct, meaning the energy, mostly energy model. So when, designers built the energy model to be compliant with the commercial code, that's a performance path, right? It's not prescriptive, it's not, ASHRAE, it's
Right.
a performance path.
Right.
And when you do that, they need to they need to build actually two sets of model. One is a baseline model, meaning that is like a bare minimum. If the same size of buildings and same configuration, if it just meets the bare minimum code, that's your baseline. And they need to build a second set of model, which is typically called proposed, meaning that's your building. So if I have a better insulation, that's how I'm gonna build here. If I have a better lighting, the lower LPD, that's how I'm gonna build here. But the baseline is just whatever the code says, the minimum. So, and then at the end, you need to prove that your proposed model is better than this base model.
And the base model is based on a modeling.
Right, so there's a
Code
performance,
compliant.
the
Period.
requirement.
Minimum.
Right, so mandatory requirement, you need to comply, but there's some prescriptive.
So there's, in the code is gives you the bare minimum
Right,
information requirements for cost.
Yep.
No,
Yeah,
for-
and
For-
it even calls out in the back as far as for your energy model, here is the what you use for your baseline, and then your proposed is as proposed, or in some of the aspects such as, there may be certain aspects such as plug load. The plug load in the baseline must match the plug load that's in your model.
What the heck's a plug load?
Anything you plug into the wall, copiers,
Oh, okay,
computers,
okay.
because I'm not going to assume that, because I'm building a better building, I'm not going to plug this copier in. No, the plug load has to match. And so it even has a table in here as far as for your energy model, what do you use for your baseline, what do you use for your proposed. Most of the time it's just as proposed. It's just certain things will say in your baseline, your model is as proposed. So, but yeah, what it's looking for is you have a baseline, and then your proposed building must save at least 15% from the code minimum. So you have to build 15% better than code as an average in order to qualify.
Is that something they could go in there and figure the baseline based on an existing building, and then if they want to add to that building?
Additions are separate.
Okay.
Well, and that's where, yes, they can do that. However, they have to use, and that's where the baseline building for that would not be the existing construction.
Okay.
It is the current code that is used for that. So if you have an if you have an R12 in the wall, or you have an R2 in that wall,
Yeah.
for your baseline building, you're going to use this. Now your proposed will reflect that it's an R2. And so it's going to be much harder to hit that 15% better
Okay.
if you do that. So, that's one where, the proposed, or the baseline must meet the minimum code throughout. Looking at O&Ms, as we noted earlier, these have to be delivered along with the training no later than 90 days after certificate of occupancy. And something else the code finally calls out is it now has to required regular maintenance actions for equipment and systems have to be clearly stated, readily visible on a label. And the label has to include where in the O&Ms they go to get more information. So
You're tagging each piece of equipment and directing them back to
each piece of
A, B, C,
equipment,
D.
yep. And you have to say on each piece of equipment, what is the regular maintenance and where do I find more information about it? Because as we've probably all experienced, training for O&M staff, you get all of 2 minutes on a piece of equipment. There it is. There it is. Okay, any questions? No, moving on to the next piece of equipment. Or you have turnover in maintenance staff. And so the person who got trained 6 months ago left. And so that's a big reason why they're now saying you have to label the piece of equipment and you have to tell them where in this stack of books I need to go look for. So if you tell me I need to grease the bearing, you got to tell me where that bearing is. So commissioning reports, buildings now have to be commissioned, and functional performance tests have to be documented beforehand, and this preliminary report must be furnished to you as the code officials. Now we're getting into alterations. So if we have a change from non-conditioned to conditioned space, this is where it allows for a performance path to be used. But this is where it's a little different in that rather than being 15% better than code, it can be up to 10% worse. Which, given that you're going from non-conditioned to conditioned, if you haven't insulated that wall at all, that 10% over is going to be hard to hit. Excessive fenestration. So if you've got a building with a lot of windows, code says that you can replace the fenestration as long as you do not increase the area of it. So if you have more than 40% in an existing building and you go to change out the windows, you can do that. Just as long as you don't increase the amount of area that you already have before you started.
You don't have to have a required minimum on that change out though, right?
You do have to follow the code requirements as far as what the values of the new ones have to be. So the new windows must meet the code U values and the solar heat gain values. And
So little bit different on residential.
So, I'm sorry, I don't understand what's the exception, provides exception for buildings with fenestration areas.
Because you might have, the code stipulates that you can't have more than 40%
Right,
windows. If you already have a building that has 60%
okay.
existing construction,
Gotcha.
and you go to change the windows, you're allowed to maintain the existing condition of you already had 60%.
So even a brand new building, you're limited to 40%.
New building must meet new code. Yep. So yeah,
What
that's
about-
why this is in alterations, this is an existing building.
But new buildings can't exceed 40%.
Correct.
What about curtain wall? I mean,
Well, if you follow the prescriptive,
Yeah.
that's the prescriptive. But
Oh,
if you
okay,
follow
you
the
have the-
performance, which is energy modeling, then
Right,
you could have
right,
curtain
okay,
walls
okay.
and stuff like that.
Don't ask me how to build a glass box. I still cannot understand how they can build those. High-rise building,
well, I remember
30
the
foot.
40, I remember the 40% because we had an existing, it was a Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yep.
And they wanted to enclose their patio area and create a conditioned space.
Mhm.
So I knew they couldn't exceed the 40%.
Yep. Yep. If you are already over the 40%, you can maintain the level at which you are. You cannot add area.
But just have to make sure that the windows comply with that UA minimum
Yep.
UA requirement
Got it.
of
But how do they do that when the windows that they're wanting to put on there are garage doors or openable?
Has to meet code.
well, the windows, but it doesn't say that it can't be open. But the window surface itself is
Yep.
within that boundary.
Yeah.
No,
I see what you're getting at.
We're
You
dealing
mean
like openable windows.
garage doors,
Or closed.
Does the garage door meet the requirement of the code? Is it
doesn't
as,
mean you can't
is
open or
the,
close it.
is the garage door,
A garage window.
does the garage door meet the required performance of the garage door per the code? So,
It just doesn't say you can't leave it open all the time if you want to, but
yep. So, but it goes back to whatever you replace it with, it must meet the provisions of the code that it falls within. But if you say, this building here, I've got 50,000 square feet of glass, I can't go to 50,001. I can maintain the 50,000 as long as I have it.
So questions about the alterations and additions. So question was about that if we relocate 7% of the lighting fixture and replace 2% of the fixture without increasing load, are we within the allowable limits for the chapter 5, which is for the alteration? The answer is yes. And even like a relocating doesn't, count as alteration. So we are only talking about 2%. And if you, replace less than 10%, then yes, you're, following the chapter 5. And then roof insulation. This is kind of interesting one. So the question is, if the cover is removed and replaced without repairing any substrate, and a new roof covering is applied, does the insulation need to be increased? What do you think? No? Your vote is no? Anybody yes? No?
Can you repeat the question again? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I was zoned out.
Okay, so this is kind of small. I will read it one more time. If the roof cover is removed
Yeah.
and replaced without repairing any substrate, and a new roof covering is applied, does the insulation
Yes.
need to
well,
be?
that's if.
Yes.
it-
Okay, there's a yes vote. Good. Okay.
Only if it's above the deck.
The
It's
substrate
placed
is the
below
deck
the deck.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
Even without repairing any substrate. Once you
Yeah.
remove that roof covering and you've exposed that insulation, yes, you have
You've
to.
exposed the insulation, but if you haven't insulated, if the attic is insulated, not the roof itself,
No.
you haven't removed the decking on that roof. Correct?
Where this comes back in, and where this came out of. Was
Yeah,
this is
all
actually,
isolated,
this
yeah.
is actually a question that the commercial state code panel is working on right now, is these are the two definitions that is provided by code as far as roof replacement and roof recover.
Right.
And so we have a scenario here where, roof recover, you install a new membrane over the existing without removing it. Or we have roof replacement, you pull the membrane, you repair any damaged substrate, and you put a new cover back on it. Now the question here is, what do you do if you pull the roof off, you pull the cover off, and you don't repair or replace any damaged substrate? Do you have to bring the insulation up to the code or not? I should have clarified that. For above deck insulation.
For above deck insulation, yes.
Got
I would think so too, yeah.
Below deck insulation, no.
it. Okay.
I think that's what we kind of, figured too.
That was kind of where we were leaning to. So that was where it's like,
Well, it's saying you can look at the residential section too. Same thing. That's creating more work to get back down to that level for sure. If you can get to it without creating more work, then
Why not?
How do you know what's there if you can't see the labels on it or something?
They have to
The
provide, generally, they have to provide that information.
for
Generally,
example, I would just stick a piece of wire down and just,
But you don't know what the R per inch is on the material, and if it's not
Per
labeled
inch.
side, or how do you know if it meets code or not?
well,
generally,
probably
they're-
on any roof.
That's
if
a
you-
good-
if you
generally they're
open it, it's
replacing
not
it
gonna
because
be
it's been
code.
damaged or it's been some type of insulation, it's been saturated with water.
Been set, yeah.
Okay, well, sounds like, again, this was one that's like the code panel right now is working through this, and we're like, I had a 30-minute phone call yesterday with them saying, okay, here's what we're thinking, various code references, and trying to get a feel, because they're not even sure. So they look at it and say, because this covers, if you don't just cover over, and if you replace damaged substrate, what do you do if you don't? So, all right.
Alright, the second one, this is the part that I made a mistake again. So in the answer on your right, scratch out the first section because that's like a copy from the previous one. When we copied this like a format, we forgot to delete the one. So it says about the lighting, on this slide on your printout, but this is fixed. So there's only 2 bullet points on your right? But on your printout, there's 3, so delete out the first one. That was about the lighting. So question this time is about roof alteration. Is there any requirement to modify any parapet, doors, curbs, things like that in order to accommodate additional insulation thickness to meet the code? And probably not, because based on the section C 5012, existing buildings, except as specified in this chapter, this code shall not be used to require the removal, alteration, or abandonment of, nor prevent the continued use and maintenance of an existing building or building system. So yeah, you don't need to change the existing system to meet the current code for the system that you're putting in. So also the C 503.1 exception, it says the following alterations need not comply with the requirements for new construction, provided that the energy use of the building is not increased. And that exception is number 3. What it says is existing ceiling, wall, or floor cavity exposed to during construction, provided that these cavities are filled with insulation. So there you have it.
So I guess that's really the question there is, with that one is, and again, I don't know if you guys will agree or disagree with this, but saying, do you have to change other stuff that is not specifically the roof itself that you went to tear off and say, well, okay, code requires this much, but I can only fit that much in it. do you have to modify other stuff and say, no, you are going to meet that R30? Or do you say, meet it to the best of your ability given the conditions you have?
Exactly. That's last.
Second with the latter.
Okay.
Then you're requiring further work than to do that to come up to compliance.
Okay. That's-
You get into
Some of-
weight, structural integrity.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was built to code, if you assume it was built to code, when it's built to code, you don't have to change anything then.
It's good. Yeah, some of this, it's good to, get out in the field and say, okay, here's what we think, but given, your guys' much more field experience rather than, our vantage point.
Remodel a house or
Computer
something.
says what you feel says.
Interior rip, or, gut job stuff, you got 2x4 walls.
Well, and that's
You're
where
not gonna
this,
get-
yeah,
You can get an R15
yeah,
in there, but you can't get 20. or-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was kind of where we referenced back to, is saying, because of this exception, while it doesn't actually apply to the roof, this kind of gives you the spirit and say, just, you don't have to fur out your 2x4 wall, but maximize it. So, this is looking at the specific Illinois amendments. So these are all posted to the CDB, Capital Development Board's website. But looking at this, so this is, again, talking about basically work with what you got within your limitations and assumes a minimum of R3.5 per inch for your insulation that you do put in. So this is kind of what we had talked about. This is one we're having a little bit of heartburn on with flashings, saying you need to be able to, that leaving a minimum of 8 inches for flashing allowance. Now this is one where we do look at, say, this could potentially increase energy consumption. Because if your existing roof only has 6-inch allowance, and this says you get 8, you could potentially pull 2 inches of insulation off that roof in order to give yourself the allowance. So this is one that, looking at it, saying, we don't really like it, but, what do you think? Is this reasonable? Is it not reasonable? At least it gives you a specific measurement that you say, there's my number, so it's not just provide adequate flashing allowance.
Yeah, but flashing is not controlled by the code. Flashing can be controlled by the manufacturer and the building code. So you would have to reference them. I wouldn't have any problem with going back to it. If it's not an energy, you're not flashing, you're not dealing with an energy. You are because of maybe the reduction of
Yeah.
insulation, but help.
Okay. This one is for tapered insulation on flat roofs. This is to provide an average of an R20. So, let's see here. This is where they're getting into a new definition for roof covering replacements. So this is trying to close that no man's land. So this is, pulled the roof covering, you didn't touch the substrate, and just putting a new roof covering over it without having to go back with more insulation. And adding this to repairs. So basically saying, if you pull the roof covering, you don't have to add insulation. We'll see. That may get, we'll see what happens with that one, because if we do go ahead and adopt the allowance where do the best you can with what you have, then you're going to know the existing conditions before you've even pulled that roof to say, okay, my limits are that curb, that parapet. Okay, I know my limits, so I know I'm going to have to go in with whatever 1 inch or 2 inch or whatever I can. This is an amendment. This would actually increase the efficiency for lighting. So in the code, it calls out 3 different, what your efficiency has to be based on the wattage. This is just saying fixtures have to be at least 55 lumens per watt, and bulbs have to be at least 65 lumens per watt.
And not less than 90%, so we went from 75 to 90%. 90%
Yes,
permanently
in the
installed.
residential.
Yeah.
In the
yeah,
residential,
yeah.
yes, we'll cover
We're
that
still,
too.
okay, we're still under C.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry, this
so
is
I
still
apologize.
commercial. So yeah, this is for like your hotels,
Yeah.
is this section, hotels, motels. And you'll see a similar one for the residential too. Maximum U values, reducing those, making them more stringent, slightly. And then also adding a other vertical fenestration that's not covered in the table already. High input domestic water heating, saying no less than 40% must be site recovered or renewable energy provided. Now high input is over 1 million BTUs an hour. So that's pretty big. That's pretty big. Couple more areas to add. Dining, corridors, transition areas. At some point, it's just the whole building for occupancy sensors. I don't know how long it'll take while we, A, B, C. Adding occupancy sensors and emergency relay control for egress lighting. So basically saying your egress lighting will need to be aux censored with an emergency override. So we'll see if that works. And they do give you an exception here for all of 2/100ths of a watt per square foot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that would.
So your egress lighting then, like in an open hallway or that now, would need to be lighted.
Open hallway, well, hallways are already covered, but
Right.
typically you'll see it where going down a hallway, every 4th fixture
Right,
is left on.
Or your egress.
Those would
lighting.
also have to be aux censored too.
Except under emergency conditions or something tripped, then
Correct.
make it all.
Correct. So there would be an interface probably to either your building automation system, your fire alarm system, or something where in the event that that system trips, turn the lights on.
Cha-ching,
There's a new business community to test and all that.
yeah.
So relays will go bad, who's gonna know it? Like when GFI goes bad, nobody knows it.
Well, everyone knows it because everyone pushes that button every month like they're supposed to.
I know what to do.
All right. Over to residential.
All right, so residential. So highlight of residential is actually no highlights. So because it has just virtually no energy efficiency improvement compared to 2015 IECC. So a little bit of disappointing news, but that's what it is. And then admin side of change, these are actually the exactly same as the commercial part that we already discussed. So I'm gonna skip through it. And then some definition change, some of them are same, but one thing maybe I wanna point out is the alteration. Before it said, alteration is any construction, retrofit, or renovation to an existing structure, something, and that requires a permit. That was the old definition of alteration. Now that requires permit. That hadn't struck out, so it doesn't need to require a permit to be an alteration.
So they're really gonna have to be self-regulation anymore.
I'm sure everyone will comply with the energy code even without that permit.
That's right.
I didn't make this change, but that's a change. And then we covered other definition changes. And just briefly mentioning,
IECC,
Well, the one reason why we're moving that is basically saying everything must comply. Whether your city requires a permit or not, it's just, it basically makes it much more general and broad, without saying, oh, well, because that doesn't require a permit, that's okay, you don't have to worry about it. Yes, we do live in
Yeah, but a
real world
requirement
too.
with no enforcement is not a requirement.
Well,
Agreed.
no, there's some communities that regardless if it's community requires or not, the builders are responsible to comply with these codes.
That is one thing is, yeah, the homeowner could potentially hold their builder liable if the builder does not deliver
Right.
Yeah.
something compliant.
Whether or not permits required or not. That's, I think, might be.
So that's, yeah.
That's part of it. I agree with that.
There's-
Good luck with that.
Well, yeah. Well, like I said, it won't be generated on our end, it would be generated by the person wondering why his house just takes too long to heat or whatever.
Yep.
And if somebody comes in and does an energy review, oh, you had this work done here and here? 95% of your customers will have no idea.
Yep.
And I go in and say, well, you call these guys right here, and they'll put you with the state, and you can sue them.
Yep.
All right, so just one slide. This is actually one of the slides that we covered during our webinar when we were talking about air sealing, but I thought it's important to share with you guys. This is a data from, I believe, DOE research, and it shows how air infiltration is important. This is, primarily consumption, but you can see as like a loss. The energy loss through the, different building component, and there are some different components like a roof, wall, but out of everything, actually under residential, the infiltration is the biggest energy loss. So that's why it is very important to have a very, tight, the envelope. So that's what we wanted to cover, and we're going to talk about some inspections.
So this is the big thing here is, we all have limited time, and so if you have to worry about certain things, what do you worry about? You worry about your infiltration first, next up your windows. Because, that's where your two biggest losses are going to come in. So, I talked earlier, or mentioned earlier, about as far as information that needs to be on the construction documents. Again, this is not a change so much, but with this, all this information should be listed for you on the construction documents. If it's not, it is not complete per code. Send it back. So, this is designed to try to make your life easier. Inspections, code calls out 5 inspections. I don't know, how many of you do all 5 of these? Couple? All right. 4. All right. More? Well, hopefully not more just for the energy code, but obviously you got plumbing inspections and electrical and all the others, but at least for energy code, these are the 5 they call out for. I've underlined the specific items. I won't read the whole thing to you. I've underlined the specific things that they call out for in each inspection as far as what you're looking for. So here, for footing and foundations, R value, locations, thickness. So you're looking at, obviously, insulation here. Framing and roughing, framing and rough-in. Again, windows, what are the U values? That's an interesting question, talking about windows. How many of you require building permits for window replacements?
Only if you're changing the size of the opening.
We require them now, and we require them to submit the,
Do you
most every
see
window
them?
that you buy now off the whatever is gonna meet the Energy Star, but we still,
That was going to be my follow-up question is, how many windows are you finding that get installed that are not meeting the requirements? as far as the use factor and solar.
Some of these cheap
It
ones that you
happens.
see come out, $88 replacement windows, yeah, they're not, gonna
Okay.
be not gas filled, which are gonna be maybe .38 or .40, which,
Yeah.
but any decent window company, I guarantee you're gonna hit .35 or less.
I think that may be one of the benefits of the, no longer having that that requires a permit text. I think Windows might be the one case where that could be a benefit.
yeah. Windows
Or
are worse.
that might be an area where you say, yeah, maybe we do need to start
Get a permit for it.
requiring permits for that. Plumbing, again, insulation's the big thing here. Mechanical, and then final inspection, looking at the lighting. Certificate. Each home should have a certificate on it. Probably furnace or electrical panel or somewhere in those areas generally. What it should list. This is one that I grabbed off that what it might look like, because again, how do I know what the windows were when they went in? Supposedly to make sure that if I replace it, I don't put a worse one in. Because otherwise my heating system might struggle. This is one of the areas that the code has decided to get away from, log homes. Basically saying, if it meets ICC 400, I'm done. I'm not even going to deal in energy codes for log homes. Do you have too many of those around? No, not really. But as long as it complies with ICC 400. Which that's predominantly because of vapor barrier. You can't put a vapor barrier inside the log. Window U factors, slight improvement here a little bit. All right. So if you have full depth insulation, if you are taking the provision to allow a reduced insulation depth, that has to go all the way across the top plate.
With a high deal crush usually.
Yes. Yeah. Full depth all the way across the plate. Sunrooms. This is something I see time and time again. Sunrooms are problems. Noting that if they are conditioned, they must meet the energy code. Now, there is a little if they are thermally isolated from the home.
So you leave an outside door, exterior door in place. and you're
Exterior
fine.
door, exterior insulation, air sealing, the whole bit. Then you can get away with a little bit less insulation for that, if they are thermally isolated. And similarly, you can get away with a little bit less stringent on the skylights for it. Speaking of sunrooms,
Sunroom or three-season room. So the question, I think it might be from the homeowner. And, hey, I have a three-season room and I have a fireplace. Do I need to comply with the energy code? And according to the residential code for 2.1, three-season room must comply with the code, just as what Ryan said, but may qualify as low-energy building. But fireplace do actually count as a heating source to determine if that's a low-energy building, if it's separated out from the main building. So, but then they were saying, oh, but it is a decorative fireplace, and we go like, what is decorative fireplace? There's like, it's hard to, there's no definition of decorative
Right.
fireplace versus functioning fireplace.
Well, you do have the one you do have ones with lighting and a 1500 watt element in it.
Something
That's-
like
that's
that
still a heater.
maybe,
Yeah, it is a heater, yeah.
but.
Yeah. Thank gosh you don't have to worry about doing a blower door test with it.
So that's what it is. And then second question, I believe this was also from the homeowner. It was about the heated garage. So if you install some form of permanent heating in a garage, does the garage need to meet the thermal envelope requirement? And yes, if
It
the,
does.
yes, space is conditioned, and yes. So, but for the, in terms of blower door test,
No.
you know, yeah, this is, if it's thermally isolated, you don't need to do the blower door test for your converted
But you
garage.
still got to heat foundation. insulate
Right,
the
but you need to
walls,
meet
you're
the,
not
all
heating
the
the
requirements,
conditioner, Attic space.
right. And then roof insulation, you know, what is the minimum continuous insulation level required for low slope or flat roof without attic space? And this is a residential. And, you know, residential doesn't actually distinguish between slope roof or flat roof. There's only one requirement for the ceiling, you know, requirement, that is R49, you know, so that's what they need to meet. Unless, you know, authority having jurisdiction determined that that's kind of hard to do it technically, then maybe there's a way around it, but in theory, yes, you need to meet the R49.
So they do a part, yeah. So they do a fiberglass up there, and then they go put 2, 3, or 4 inches up on the roof and cover it over. So there's always a way to do it. It's just a way to design house if you're doing that small a space.
Right. And then moisture control question. So what is the moisture control requirement of the energy code regard to the use of vapor retarder? And we go like, energy code doesn't really require the moisture control. You know, we don't have the requirement. But the International Residential Code have some requirement. We're not the expert on that part of it, but
Our zone down here, you
Mhm.
don't have to deal with it.
good. So that's it. And we're gonna talk about some of their barriers.
Yeah, that's, the roofs one, that's a little bit of a weird one where you have if you put a flat roof on a commercial, it's R30. If you put a flat roof on a residential, it's R49. It's a little weird, but it's a difference. So anytime you guys probably run into problems, this table, R402, 411, this can be a very beneficial table for you. And this covers air barriers and insulation. Most of your indoor air quality problems are probably found on this table because someone did something wrong from this table. So this can be very beneficial to you as far as when you're dealing in code enforcement. Be like, you know, if you're likely to have a problem, this table may cover it. Yeah. So it's not a change, but very important for you guys. Ductwork testing, they've now exempted the ERV or HRV ducts from your duct testing for leakage.
Okay, so I've got a few HRVs in my area, but all the ductwork's within the conditioned area, so it goes away. So you're telling me there now, if you have partial of the ductwork system that runs through an attic, if they do have an ERV or an HRV, they're no longer required to test it.
The ductwork dedicated to the ERV or HRV.
That's what I mean, so it could.
So if it is ductwork that is associated with the air handler, that's got to be tested. So this is just the ductwork that is associated with the ERV or HRV, because
Okay.
presumably this is outside air. So
they would have
if
to
you
isolate
leak
that
outside
off of-
air.
Yeah.
So if you leak outside air into your outside air system, you know.
Okay.
Ducts fully buried. So there's now provisions in there for how do you treat ducts that are fully buried. And fully buried in this case means if it's an R49, you have to have a R49 above that duct. So fully insulated.
So then if they're fully buried, they're not considered in the unconditioned space, so then they don't have to have a blast test?
If they are fully buried, no, it's not that. What it is for fully buried, it allows for those to be modeled better if you're doing energy modeling. Where before, even if you fully buried that duct in R49,
You couldn't.
the energy model would reflect an R8, because that's what's on the duct. So this kind of fixes one of the problems in the software.
And that's an issue too.
This is not a change, but I was surprised when I caught this in the code. Drain water heat recovery. How many of you require it? Per the code, it's in there. So this is one that when I saw that, I'm like, wait, that's required now?
It's been required since 2015.
And that was one that because I had seen it probably 10 years ago, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
What's the
I don't know when
status
you
on
do
that?
it.
I mean, it's, okay, what are the provisions that kick in to require that? It's just like if your system piping is under X amount of feet, you're not required to insulate your piping.
It is, per the code, this is required.
All that-
All it
Okay.
says is that, if you have it, it has to comply with CSA. It doesn't say you have to have it.
Ah, okay. Maybe that's
If you
not.
have it, it has to
That's what
comply
I was
with
gonna
it.
say.
Okay,
Whoa,
maybe
wait a
maybe
minute.
that's it. Okay. Yeah,
Good one, Josh.
Good catch. Good catch. Yeah.
Get it, Josh.
Which I don't know.
So you can show the line, I
Yeah. Weird.
I'm gonna call you for now for all my questions.
Yeah. Whoa.
There we go.
They want speed dial.
All right. Fan efficiency. They now require fan efficiency for HRVs and ERVs. I don't see that being much of an issue. It could be. Ducts in conditioned space. So this actually provides you the criteria to determine is your duct in the conditioned space or not. So it is obviously completely within the air barrier. Okay, that makes sense. So if I leak, I'm inside the air barrier. Or buried in the ceiling. So this gets back to your duct testing.
Yeah.
If you're buried in the ceiling insulation and your air handler is within the air and thermal barrier, and your duct leakage testing has to be less than 1.5 CFM per 100 square feet.
So they're still gonna have to test it either way if they're gonna choose that path.
So you're going to have to test and full depth insulation above the duct. So so the R49 above the duct and extremely tight ducts.
Yeah, I'm decided that's just,
Yeah,
that's
because I
the
think
issue. Putting it above it, I mean, you can get it on top of the duct, but it's the 3 foot
'Cause
coming
it's-
around it that you got to
Yep.
dial up too.
because it's duct 3 to 4 CFM, and this is saying you have to be 1.5. So it's going to be tight. So, otherwise, your ducts are not in the conditioned space, and then you have to test them. Equipment sizing, manual J and manual S. I don't know how many of your builders and HVAC people are doing manual J's. They should be getting better.
That's the first
Okay. So they're getting better, because I know that was a problem. Has anyone seen something like this submitted? Sizing sheet, calculation sheet. It's not a manual J, but I don't know if you guys had seen this before.
Usually what I see on the sizing, I don't know about you, Kevin, is they're gonna give us paper on it. It looks like a blueprint's gonna show the sizing
Okay.
on there. I mean, this is what I'm used to seeing, right?
So, okay. This is another one that had come across my desk, and I'm like, I wonder if anyone else has used this or not, or, so it sounds like not. Okay. Pool covers, again, 70 up to 75%. Really nice retractable ones. Lighting for residential is now 90% of fixtures. Used to be 75%. And there is no more low voltage exception. Low voltage lighting counts in here too. So, that used to be a way that a lot of people would get around it is, oh yeah, I'll put in low voltage track lighting.
I know
Yeah,
one,
but like
one
you
of-
said, these days, everything is so much better than, they're making it better, so.
Yeah, but with low voltage track lighting, a lot of people still use halogens with those.
Sure.
So LEDs, oh my gosh, they're getting so, what, I love the fact that I don't have to worry about changing a bulb.
Yep.
There was never a definition, but that I had brought this up before, so, okay, you say permanently installed fixtures. What do you do with an LED strip where you roll it out and you cut it off at 50 or 75 or that? I know the answer from earlier, we asked our old guy. He said it wasn't in there, but they gave us a definition of it. What would be your definition?
Does it plug in?
Yes.
Okay, so, that was kind of the same one. So if you have 100 and it plugs in, that's one. If you have 50 and it plugs in, that's one. You can add
It's a
another
plug
50
load.
and it plugs in.
It's a plug load, it's not.
Ah, okay.
Rope lighting.
Yeah. Go to the end, cut it off, there you go. One
I mean,
plug.
that's where it's like, again, it's kind of like the NEC stops at the outlet.
Yeah, boy, yeah.
At least with most things, it stops at the outlet. So, yeah, that's one that's like, yeah.
Counting the bulbs, yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, that's, to me, it's because it's a plug load, it doesn't count as any.
It's gonna count 0 for lighting.
That does not count as permanently installed lighting.
Gotcha. Unless it's a wired transformer.
Wired transformer, now it counts.
Okay.
And then, I mean, yeah, you get into some of that. Ventilation for 2018 does count in your energy model. 2015, the ventilation system did not. Multifamily unit modeling. So if you have identical units with identical exposure and, so I've got 40 units that all face the same direction, same exposure, same square footage. You can say, give me one model, I don't need 42. But for a given building, kind of like a Rubik's Cube, for a given building, I could have, would that be 20, in theory, 27 models? Could I have 27 surfaces for Rubik's Cube? Because I got to do each. So these two have identical exposures. This end one's a different one, that's different. So these two can be used one. That one is different. So it helps in some of
I'm
this.
not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This is for when you're doing an energy model for your energy costs. So this is performance-based. So this is performance-based. It says if you have two units that are identical exposure, and okay, it's just a mirror, I only need one model for it. I don't need a model for each one.
But they're taking, you could have, if that splits there, you could have 4 different
So
models.
So with this, I could have one here, one, this one can use that one here, one here, one here, those two match, one here, one here. So you can end up with a lot of models, but if you're building a large apartment complex where you've got identical buildings, just give me one batch. I don't need, if I'm building identical buildings, I don't need every single one. Mechanical ventilation is in the reference model now too. Because buildings are getting tighter, previously the baseline reference did not include ventilation. It now includes it. So, vehicles again excluded, because they're not part of the building. This is the big change. ERI, or a HERS rating, dramatically increased. Used to be 54 or 55 rating. You can now do it with as high as a 61 or 62. Now this is percent savings off of a 2006 baseline. So you have to build at least 38% better than a 2006 building, which basically matches that chart from earlier where a 2006 building is 80% better than the 75. So if you multiply it out, it works. So you might see much more HERS ratings done rather than So in residential, you can have prescriptive, your checklist, your performance, your energy cost, or your HERS rating,
Which is a modeling.
which is another form of modeling. Yes. So, software, they've removed the specific software from the list because it's now just part of the path. International existing building code is now part of the code list. Fenestration, you can do area weighted average for your fenestration requirements and compliance. So if you have a specialty window, a stained glass window, or something that's obviously not going to meet your U.32, you can do better windows elsewhere to make up for that deficiency. I think this was one we've kind of covered. Permits required.
So the window for permit, so based on the 2015, it says yes, but then now, probably not. Insulation for alteration. So question was, if a wood framed wall of an existing home is being re-insulated, what is the required R value? And this is not a whole wall assembly, but rather it's just interior alteration. So the answer they were provided is based on R 503.1.1. The work is alteration that requires at least R3 per inch. And if it's just an existing ceiling, wall, or floor cavity just exposed during the construction, then these cavities are just filled with insulation. You don't need to meet up to the code. So, that's just a reasonable thing. And we have a few more amendment proposals for the residential part, and I think we are almost the end of the slide.
All right, here we are. We'll push through and get to the end here. All right. Similarly, residential side, looking at roof covering replacement. Typically, again, these they're looking at flat roofs here again, which probably don't have too many of these on residential at least. So yeah, very similar. Now this is one, there was an amendment put forward to change. Illinois was at 5 ACH. The code calls for 3. There was an amendment put forward to take that from 3 to 2. So you'd go from 5 down to 2. After some discussion, the recommendation's now moving it from 5 to 4. It is anticipated that for the 2021 code, they are going to eliminate this amendment completely and go with the code.
Oh, okay, so whatever code.
Whatever code is, it will be that.
But this
So
was
rather
just
than-
decided during the subcommittee meeting, and that needs to go
Correct.
to the general meeting, and
Yep.
that's where it gets decided.
They're
So it's in
looking
the
at it,
process, but
Yeah,
it
this
seems
is-
like,
This is under consideration. At this point, it could be 5, it could be 4, it could be 2, it could be 3. But at this point, the committee's recommendation, the proposal was to go to 2, from 5 to 2, and they're like, whoa, that's a bit much. And so the committee's recommendation is going to say, we're going to go from 5 to 4. And then the anticipation is in the next code cycle, they're going to do away with the amendment, so we'll go to 3.
It's gonna make them tighter. Are you getting, I'm getting buried. I've gotten it down close to 2, and one I just had in recently come
That's
like,
what I was just saying, if
4
they're
points.
already there, if they're doing it right.
well, they're close. I just had one the other day come up like a 4.6.
Ooh.
Yeah, he was pushing it, but
Haven't had any 5.0s exactly.
No.
Hey, I made it.
yeah,
Mine are 4.8 or something.
Okay, 4.8. Yeah.
So I don't know if they're suitable or not.
Yeah. See, we're seeing a lot, and I don't know how many are requiring independent third-party testing on it versus having the builder do it.
Oh, it has to be third party.
all of ours are third
Okay.
party.
Yeah. Well, that's at least hopeful.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're seeing a lot of people that they're able to get under 3s now. But
2.34 up to 3 is,
Yeah, at the time that the code change happened, it went from 7 to 3. And so that's where Illinois, when that code changed, they're like, we're going to 5. We're not going from 7 to 3. We'll go to 5, and so we're working our way down.
Just a builder. And depending on how particular they are, you know, the
Yeah.
spec houses, they don't really care about it, or they,
Yeah, so they're, and that's where the trend is, it's gonna have to get tighter.
wow.
Ducts, allowing code official to require third-party testing of ducts. Not requiring, but allowing you to require that. High-efficiency lighting, again, similar to commercial. This is where, going back to your residential, multifamily, multi-unit question, there is a proposed amendment to allow for individual blower door testing and sampling. So because when you end up with high surface area to the volume ratios, your ACH really becomes problematic. Because a little bit of leak across the whole surface area can really screw up your ACH on smaller test areas. So with this, allowing you to do it based on surface area, an air leakage test for surface area rather than ACH. So this is very similar to what's allowed in commercial, but bringing it over to residential. This also allows for sampling. So if you have more than 7 units, you can do a sampling protocol for that, which I won't get into all the amendments on that. But if you go over 7 units, then you can start to do sampling of units.
Is that in the code now?
No.
Just
Now you have to do each one?
Well, right now it is, you can do each one, you can do the whole mass of them, but right now in the code, you have to do every single one.
Yeah.
So either you can do it individually or you can do the whole group of them together, but all of them have to be tested.
How would you do the whole group of them together?
If you have a common hauling.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so right now you have to test all of them. This proposal would allow for sampling, where you have to do the first 7 and then groups, you have to do 1 out of other groups of 7. So at a minimum, you'd have to test one, you have to test at least 7 and then one out of 7 thereafter.
Well, that's for low rise, maybe no more than what, 3 or?
All residential. Because again, because we changed,
Oh, it took from that, yeah.
because of that change,
Multifamily back-
if you have your 10-story multifamily, that's now residential section. Because those are residential areas.
But the way this is
Residential
worded-
buildings.
The way this is worded for low rise multifamily buildings.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't read that. So yes, this exception would only be for low rise. Which I think is predominantly because they're looking at, that's where this runs into. And I think part of that is also the code, the people dealing with the code right now are still that mindset of, once I'm at 4 stories, I'm commercial. So, again, so these are Illinois amendments. So we'll see if that happens, but at least this is a proposal out there. Here's talking about the actual sampling rate and scheme. Again, it's first 7 and then 1 out of 7 thereafter. And if you fail, then there's a bunch of other stuff. So, really riveting reading. Now this was one that came out within the committee meeting. And what this is looking at is going back to the Illinois amendments section that were proposed for 2015. One thing I would like to change is to remove the amendment for the HERS rating and to allow the HERS rating to be allowed by default. Previously, for the 2015 amendments, it was only with approval. So they had to come to you to ask, may I do a HERS rating before they could do it. This allows them to do it by default, if they wish. Part of that is, HERS is becoming more developed and more standard. pretty much most all the other amendments for 2015 are proposed to carry forward to 2018. So, here's one you guys might probably run into a fair bit. Residential garage conversion.
So this is one of the last couple of slides. We're almost there. I know caterer is going back and forth for us to finish this year, so we'll be quick. So the question was for an existing garage and I want to convert to the living space. What do I need to do? So first of all, that was a change of occupancy. And then, so that's like alteration, so they need to do the, comply with the code, and what do we do with the slab? So, technically they need to meet all the, envelope provisions, but practically it is very difficult. So what the recommendation that we came up with, maybe they insulate the top of the slab, entire slab with R10. That's not code, but that's the best way that we can kind of compromise. So
The code calls for what, R10, 2-foot depth?
24-inch down, right?
So-
4 in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
And-
in a
Below,
flat.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, 2
These
foot,
are-
and so
Right.
that's where this was saying, what if you insulate the entire slab, R10 across the whole slab? Technically, that doesn't fit what the code says that you have to do, but
Realistically, it's better than what.
right. But it meets the spirit of the
that was
energy
kind
code.
of the argument, was saying it's at least as good as what the code requires.
That's a good idea. They can put the
Does this
channel
work for
floor or
people?
something
Does
on
it
top
not?
of it.
Right. So,
Would you guys allow that?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, that's an easy fix rather than them having to dig up the perimeter and put an insulation in the perimeter or bust the slab back 2 feet out all the way around and get it under and re-pour the slab. R10 on top and then decking or raise the floor up if they want.
right. So that's a compromise and it's maybe a, option that we came up with. And this one, I think we briefly mentioned that this wasn't actually a question, but when we talked to the code official in Charleston, he mentioned that he is seeing more and more of sealed crawl space, and he sees this as a big problem because it's sealed up, and then it's not like air conditioning or heater is running all season. There are a lot of days that no HVAC system is running. What do we do with this then enclosed crawl space? So maybe the heat recovery ventilation or energy recovery ventilation to just have the ventilation moving all year long, even though there's no heating or cooling. So that was kind of option, and I think it is a feasible solution.
Back in the space.
And then last slide. So this is just a section, and I hope it's easy to see, but it shows here there's a gap in the insulation, right? And any other problem you see here?
Any other problem with this detail?
This is a rim
Air
joist.
sealing.
Huh?
In the air sealing underneath the, I don't see the air sealing noted on.
Air sealing.
Under
Right.
the plate,
Right.
How many people love the fiberglass band insulation in the rim joist
yeah. And
with
again,
no air seal?
and it's not covered.
Right.
That's true, yeah.
So you guys all cover, you guys all know, and
Nope.
that was the end of the presentation. And go ahead and get food, and we are gonna be here. So if you have any questions, you can have food, and then you can also ask questions, and we'll be here for a while. So thank you very much.